Okie dokie, everybody. How are you doing this brisk Sunday morning? Is it brisk where you're at? It is where I am, which I'll be honest, I actually quite like. It's quite nice. It's quite nice to get away from the super duper oppressive, humid heat. I like it. I like it. It does mean that, unfortunately, you do get in that era of like, it's way too cold. Then you know what? You can bundle up. It's actually kind of nice. This is a good spot to be in. Of course, when you get into your car, it's disgusting. It's absolutely awful because you're like, I need to bundle up. I need to put on like an extra layer, and then you get into the car, and the car's baked by the sun, and you just start getting like you start to immediately sweat, and your skin's dry, so it hurts, like it prickles. It's like needles in your skin. It's disgusting. I hate it. So then you have to go into your car and you have to turn on the air conditioning, even though it's cold. It's cold outside. You have to turn on the air conditioning so that you're not overheating and sweating in your car when you're going to the store. I hate it. I don't like it. These kind of liminal periods, they are the worst. You don't usually get this in spring. You get this in autumn. You get this in fall all the time. And I really don't like it. It's like my least favorite time of the year. But just for like walking around, having the windows open, something like that, it's actually very, very nice. And it's almost like, there's a good argument to be said that it's like one of my favorite times of the year. Yeah. It's nice. I don't know though. All right, so let's see. So we've got a couple different videos I want to go through. First video is the trade war. Trump's trade war 6 months later. I actually really like this guy in terms of putting forward modern stuff in the context of history. His like the one video that I kind of like saw from him that really made me take notice of this channel and this guy was his initial sort of like, hey, what's going on with the trade war? What's going on with Trump's and tariffs and these types of things? And he kind of got into it, but it was so early that you could never really tell. You had no idea what was gonna happen. But he spends the majority of the video, or at least the majority of the video in my mind, it takes up the most space in my mind, explaining the historical context of trade, tariffs, the U.S.'s role, the dollar, how the dollar reaches, dominance as the reserve currency of the world, essentially, and what that does for other countries, plus the U.S. And I thought that was really, really well done. Really gave me a better understanding of, the financial world that we live in and what the potential issues for, these tariffs and whatever going forward would be. So I do want to basically check in on him again whenever he's talking about these larger issues. I think he does. Let me double check here, but I think he does a bunch of other just like much more like specifically finance stuff.
Welcome to the Money and Macro channel. My name is Yuri Gasford, and
and it's just kind of like I don't care about all of that as much. I care more about the specific overarching U.S. economic stuff, and then also like kind of where it fits into historical patterns. That's the stuff that I find most interesting. Like if I was going to dive into really specific economic issues, like okay, like what's Bitcoin doing, and how can I get into it? Like where should I buy? Blah 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 blah. That type of stuff. This maybe he's got some stuff on that, but I'm not as interested in that. In terms of like watching this, especially not while I'm streaming, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. The last video we watched from him was Gary's Economics, and I mean it was just a bunch of like TikTok economists, and I think he gave some good points. And again, I'm happy to see somebody who has a more kind of rational science brain attacking the sort of the TikTok economists, because for me the TikTok shorts, reels, economic takes are always just based on sort of like feelings and intuitions. Like they're trying to rile people up to do something, whether it's join their movement, join their their YouTube channel, share, hey man, what's the only thing you can do? And I was like, you can share Gary's Economics. You can tell everybody about Gary's Economics. It's great. Yeah, tell them about that channel. You don't have to mention my name. Just tell them about everything that I say, such that when they go on YouTube, they search for something like that, and I'm obviously going to be the first name that pops up. So you're like indirectly funneling them to my channel. That's cool. All right. Ooh, actually, you know what? Let's see what we've seen here. We see actually, is a wealth tax actually possible? I'm going to sneeze. No. Did sneeze. Okay, good. All right, so we've got this other one here. Is a wealth tax actually possible? You know what? That might actually be slightly better because the video we did, not yesterday, but the day before, with, oh my God, was his name like Randall Peterson? It was on trigonometry. It was the guy who basically debated, actually, you know what? We have it up here, don't we? Yeah. What's his name? Daniel Priestley. I wasn't even close. Daniel Priestley goes through this and he's like, here are the issues with a wealth tax. All right. And I was kind of, before that video, I was a little bit like charitable with Gary's Economics. And I was saying, you know what? Like maybe in specific, certain super specific instances, super specific, policies and these types of things could be done in a way to make holding wealth and resources that are finite and also necessary less attractive to people. So the thing that I always bang on about, and I will continue to, would be like a land tax. Now, in the UK, I don't know if that is as good of an idea because there's way less land in the UK, and therefore, because the supply is lower, the price of it is going to be higher, and therefore the value of that land is always going to be higher. And unless you carve out a lot of like specific, what would we call it? A lot of like really specific exemptions, you're going to end up just destroying not only the land value, but like everything that uses land to produce something. So like every farm, every like working farm is going to be completely destroyed. If there's any kind of a wealth tax whatsoever, British farming is done. It's 100%, it's over. And what's going to happen is, foreign investors are going to come in and they're going to buy it all up. You're going to get, China owning all the farmland in the UK. You're going to get, Denmark. You're going to get whatever. Norway, I think is the example he used. BlackRock. You're going to get all of these foreign interests buying it all up because the wealth tax basically means that anytime somebody dies, or not even dies, but just like when they come to their, yearly tax bill, if you got to pay 2% of the value of your land, and somebody's coming in and they're saying, okay, well, we're evaluating your land, your, 1,000 acres of working farm for, it's £1 million, let's say. Okay, that means you now have, what? Like an extra $20,000 every year that you have to pay. It's like most farms are like barely operating break-even point. So if you have to get an extra 20,000 pounds every year, that means you're going to have to sell off part of your land. And if you sell off a part of your land, the land becomes less valuable because it's you don't have as much stuff to produce, blah, 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 blah. It keeps going and going and going and going. And then very quickly, you've lost all of that land. And that's even without getting into the sort of inheritance tax where, all right, you now have a 40%, 50% wealth tax. So 40% of the value of all the stuff that you own now needs to be paid in taxes. Okay, so now that £1 million of farmland that you own, now your inheritors are on the hook for 400,000 pounds of tax that they have to pay. Okay, well, how do you do that? You don't have $400,000. You don't have £500,000 in wealth just sitting around. No, you have to sell it. You're going to basically have to sell off half your farm, if not your entire farm, because again, what it's valued at is not what it's going to sell for. And especially if they're like, oh, hey, you're under the gun. You need this, or else you're going to get carted away to jail because you're not paying your taxes. Okay, well, then guess what? All the buyers have you over a barrel and they can go, okay, you're saying this is worth $1 million, but I don't feel like I'm going to pay. I feel like I'm going to pay 600. I feel like 600. I feel like that's, that's reasonable, right? Yeah. You don't have a choice. You have to pay it. So you have to take that money. So you have to lose the value of these things. And then, British farming's done. So all of these things are basically just, the wealth tax without an enormous amount of exemptions, which would be very easy to game, such as, is done in the States here, hey, I've got 50 acres. Okay, well, you got to pay land tax on that. Well, no, not if it's a working farm. What do? They get llamas. Literally, this happens all the time. This happens all the time in the States. They get llamas. They don't do anything, but they incorporate as a, llama farm. And then that's it. That's all they do. That's it. They have a, an agro tax break. And now they don't have to pay that land tax. Okay, so what do you think is going to happen when, the super rich Duke of Cornwall or whatever the hell, is looking to pay, 2% land tax value? Okay, if there's an exemption, they're going to do what it takes to make that, land tax exemption. Maybe it's like, okay, you need to have a working farm and it needs to produce a certain amount of money per year. Okay, well, what are they going to do? They're going to invest the money to make that a working farm. Now, maybe that's good because now you have more working farms, but you're not redistributing wealth, which was your goal the whole time. So you're not getting, you're not parceling up the country into, more discrete units for people to buy. You're not allowing more people to buy into land for wealth accruement. This is not going to happen. And I was very gung-ho about that. I was like, you know what? I think it's completely reasonable that somebody would do that. But after listening to Daniel Priestley, I'm like, even that, I mean, I did still have all these objections beforehand, but I was like, you know what? Maybe we could still do it. Like maybe there's a scheme to do it. Now I'm like, I'm back on I just, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It can't work. The only way to get through this is to free it up. Putting any kind of extra tax burdens on these things is stupid. It's insane. It's not going to work. So he's saying here, all right, is wealth tax actually possible? Is it possible? Yeah, you could definitely implement it. Would it actually get you the results that you want? I am massively skeptical / I don't think it's possible at all. So you know what? We will make a video on that. And then, but first of all, I want to get into this. I want to see what the current state of the trade war is 6 months later. So let's check that out.
Inflation is dead. China, the economy, the best we've ever had.
Yes, it's already been 6 months since Trump kicked off his presidency by announcing tariffs against China, Mexico, and Canada. This triggered a massive fall in the US stock market. But today, the stock...
Yeah. Let's throw this on. Is Trump's trade war working 6 months later?
This triggered a massive fall in the US.
Oh man. All right, started the trade war. Bam, that's bad. Huh. We're right back to where we were. Actually a little bit higher. Huh. I guess trade war not as destructive as everybody was saying.
Stock market, but today the stock market is higher than ever, despite Trump threatening more and more tariffs. And yes, the US dollar went down by a lot since Trump started talking about tariffs, but big picture, it's really not that much lower than just a year ago. On top of that, tariffs have not caused much inflation.
Oh, yikes. Jeez, okay.
The United States. And yes, the US economy is projected to grow more slowly due to tariffs, but so far the US is likely to keep growing quite a bit faster than other major advanced economies.
Huh. Jeez. Okay. How can I spin this to make Trump look bad? All the charts are wrong. Statistics is completely not a real thing. And in fact, it's only there to confuse and obfuscate you. Yeah. That makes sense.
Like Germany, the UK, and Japan. So what was all the fuss about? And what actually happened in these last 6 months? Trump announced tariffs, paused them, increased them, got some deals done, while others keep getting delayed. In this video, we'll create some order in all of this chaos by, number one, giving you a visual overview of what actually happened.
Oh, yeah,
Two,
all right.
discuss what the effects.
Okay, 6 months later, expectations, inflation was supposed to go up. It stayed about the same. I guess that's relatively true. I mean, the other side of that is like inflation kind of sort of always goes up. So if it doesn't increase at, accelerating pace, then it's kind of on track, even if it did actually go up. Economic growth expectations was it would slow down, and reality is it did slow down. The dollar would go up. I don't know, but it went down. Stock market would go down. The reality was that it went up. Okay.
On the US economy are so far. Number three, discuss the effects on the US's biggest trading partners, some of whom could actually be benefiting a little bit here and there. And finally, number four, discuss whether or not Trump's plan to re-industrialize the United States and let foreigners pay for it is already working. So let's jump right into Trump's trade war 6 months later. This graph by...
Come on, bud. Let me pop back. Come on. Did you see it?
Trade war 6 months later.
Come on, man. I know you've got an editor. 6 months? Hits later? Come on.
Later. This graph by economist Joey Politano is the best graph I could find to summarize what Trump has actually
That's
been
a
up
lot
to.
going on,
Tariffs
man.
are difficult to keep track of because they target different countries and different products.
Very true.
For example, Trump has put particularly high tariffs on countries like China and on products like steel and cars. But what does this actually mean for the American economy? That is what this graph is all about, as it shows the average US tariff rate based on what type of good and from whom Americans imported in 2024.
Okay.
For example, and this is just hypothetical, if 10% of all US imports were steel and aluminum, then a 50% steel and aluminum tariff would raise the average US tariff rate by 5%.
Okay, I gotcha.
So, what happened so far? This graph shows...
So this is just, in general, tariff rates. In total. Now, obviously, the reason it had all of these annotations is because the general tariff rate, could go just a slight bump. This could have been like, all right, this is a 7,000% tariff on like Vietnam, and Vietnam provides like a small amount of stuff, and like the tariff rate is super high, but it doesn't matter. So I mean, it's kind of a weird chart. I get it. And obviously, like, with all the annotations, you can go, oh, okay, you can figure it out. I don't know if this is like a great chart. Like, visually speaking, it doesn't really tell you that much because, again, the amount of other stuff you need to keep in your head doesn't really help.
10 important milestones. After announcing impending tariffs against Mexico and Canada on his first day, Trump then hit China with a 10% tariff increase in early February. Second, he hit China, Mexico, and Canada with more tariffs early March.
Bam.
Third, he excluded goods that fell under the original US-Mexico-Canada agreement, causing the average tariff rate to drop again. Fourth, he raised tariffs on steel and aluminum. Fifth, he introduced...
See, this is the whole thing, where it's like the amount of arrows that you need to explain this chart. Like, a chart should be good enough that you don't need any extra stuff. The reason you put it into a chart is because the chart speaks for itself. Like, this is not... I don't care how good you are at reading charts. I don't care how incredibly statistically minded you are. This chart doesn't tell you anything in terms of like it actually helping you understand the state of tariffs.
Tariffs for most countries and 25% more for cars. Then we got to the big stuff. Number 6, this big spike here is Liberation Day with its reciprocal tariffs against everyone. 7, Trump then quickly paused most of these tariffs while raising tariffs by a lot against...
He couldn't have paused most of them if they only dropped by that amount, he couldn't have paused most of them. He must have only paused like a small amount of them. Yeah, he had to have, because otherwise it would have dropped all the way down. Because the full tariff rate, it would have dropped. It would have had to have dropped closer to here, closer to this, little dip before it, it jumps. It would have had to have been down here, like to over here. Like if he had actually paused most of them, it would be over here. And I hope you can see my actual thing. I don't know if you can. Yeah.
China, meaning that the average tariff rate dropped but remained pretty high. Number 8, and Trump slapped some more car tariffs on Canada and Mexico. 9, the average tariff rate dropped by a lot after Trump paused tariffs against China. And finally, the average rate increased again when Trump announced a 25% steel and aluminum tariff in June. And that's it. So
okay, that's where we're at now.
Entire trade war, at least until early July, when I'm recording this video. He's right now threatening a bunch of new tariffs, so that's not in the chart yet, but it may be updated on Mr. Politano's website.
Sure.
So I hope it has helped to provide some clarity about how, on average, tariffs have gone up and down under Trump. That's all nice and well, but of course, it does not tell us anything about the positive or negative effects of these tariffs.
Gotcha.
On the negative side, tariffs were widely expected to wreck the US economy. But did they indeed do that? Let's dive in.
No. And I mean, this is the whole point, is that most people who are making those proclamations that, you know what, if there's this tariff thing, what's going to happen is the entire US economy is going to explode. It's going to implode. It's going to die. It's going to, it's going to wreck it. It's going to destroy it. The problem is that all of those people that are making those types of claims think that they can understand the economy. And if the economy was that understandable, if you could actually make sense of it in that manner, command economies would work. You could have super centralized, socialist, communist, state control over, all economic activity, and it would work. Those economies would function, and they would function well, because you'd be able to understand the economy. And you could go, okay, we need a little bit more of this, we need a little bit less of this, we'll move stuff around, bing, bang, boom, we're good. The thing is that that's not what happens. What happens is every single actor in the economy, every individual, is making their own decisions from their own perspective, and their own perspective is usually way better informed about, their own specific circumstances. And therefore, they're adjusting based on that. And that allows, free market economic plans to adapt very quickly and make better decisions, such that it's very difficult to really fully destroy a free market economy. You can have dips, you can have crashes, but you're able to recover. In like command economies, you can't. Like if there's a crash, it's over. You're done. It's toast. You'll never recover, because they can't dig out of that hole, because they don't, they can't understand what's happening. You can't make these calculations in a, command economy, because they're just, the problems are too large. They have to be distributed throughout the entire economy for these things to actually adapt correctly and quickly, which is what's happening.
What did 6 months of tariffs do to the US economy? Right from the start of Trump's trade war, economists have been warning about 3 possible negative effects from tariffs. Number 1, inflation. Number 2, less economic growth. And number 3, a more valuable dollar. Yes, a more valuable dollar can be positive, but it may make it more difficult to export from the US, which Trump doesn't like. So in this light, the Trump team mostly talked about a higher dollar as a negative side effect of tariffs. Finally, after the sky-high tariff increases on Liberation Day, investors expected US companies would make far fewer profits, meaning financial markets then lost trillions of dollars.
Gotcha.
In total, that is 4 negative effects from tariffs.
Okay.
So, which of these have held up and which did not? Let's start with inflation.
If I remember, it's like one of them actually held true. So economists have a 25% success rate at predicting super giant broad trends. I don't know about you, but I think 25% correct answers is like a failing grade. I could be wrong.
What happens if you increase tariffs by roughly 15% in a short time? You'd think the price of imports would go up dramatically, and therefore average prices of goods would at least go up by a couple of percentage points. But as you can see here, inflation has not gone up. It continued to fall. Of course, it could be that inflation would have fallen way faster if not for Trump's tariffs. However, more detailed research by The Economist on how much highly tariffed products have gone up in price also shows that the initial impact on inflation has been
Let me go back to
modest.
this chart.
Research would have
Okay. It doesn't actually give me a good thing. So is this actual inflation? No. This is the rate of inflation. This is the rate of inflation increase. Yeah. So like this is like 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%. This is the rate it's increasing year on year. It has to be. It's got to be. Because again, like I said, inflation is essentially, because we're on a fiat currency and, therefore they're always like printing more money. We've essentially got a situation where inflation is always going to happen in the US. That's just the way it is. I would love to get off of that and go back to a gold standard. That'd be fantastic. But this is where we're at. So it is, so essentially like, it's not falling. Inflation's not falling. It's just that the rate at which it's increasing has decreased. So it's, it's not, I don't know if you want to say it's decelerating, but it's accelerating less quickly. Let's put it that way.
Fallen way fast. Impact on inflation has been quite modest. How is that possible? In a recent blog, economist Noah Smith discusses 3 reasons. The first is that US importers bought a lot of stuff from China and other countries right before the tariffs came into effect. Therefore, importers could keep prices low up to now. The second possible reason is that tariffs are already having an effect, but that companies are absorbing the costs. This could be American companies, but there also is some evidence that Trump was partially correct when he said foreigners would pay for the tariff. That is, Professor Marcela Olarega and Sarah Santander from the University of Geneva have estimated that on the median, foreign exporters are paying 53% of US tariffs so far.
That's the majority.
Finally, it is possible that Trump's chaos has caused Americans to spend less overall, and this then would have reduced prices throughout the economy, partially cancelling out increased prices on imported goods.
Okay.
This brings us to our second predicted effect, lower GDP growth, which, unlike inflation, is clearly what we're seeing. Concretely, the US economy was widely expected to grow by 2.4% in 2025. But after 6 months of Trump's trade war, most analysts now expect the US economy will only grow by about 1.5 or 1.7%.
Okay, now here's the other side of this. They say growth projections on here. That does not tell me exactly what it was, but he said earlier it was GDP growth. So the other side of GDP, the reason why people look into it is one of the factors is your population. So if Trump is deporting, let's say, I don't think it's like a million, but let's say it's a million people. Let's say he's deporting, 1 million illegal immigrants. If that's the case, your population drops, and therefore your GDP growth is also going to drop because you have less people. And therefore it kind of looks to markets like, okay, you're going to be able to produce less because you've got less people. This is the argument that Daniel Priestley was making about, how you're financing debt in the UK. They're doing that by importing a whole bunch more people. That's making their population grow, and therefore they're able to go to their central bank and say, "Hey, we've got more people. We're growing. Our GDP is going up, so we can keep, financing more debt to pay for more stuff." And that could also be a legitimate factor here in terms of the growth projections being, lower than they would be. Not necessarily just because of tariffs. Could have other factors.
So tariffs are bad for economic growth. That prediction is holding up quite well so far. In contrast, the prediction that the Trump tariffs would increase the value of the dollar is not holding up at all. Sure, the dollar did not really fall that far compared to just a year ago, but it's still interesting that it fell right after the tariffs came into effect, while it went up during.
let's see. This is 2024. Well, it started to fall from here, 2024. This would have been probably like, let's say March. It dropped.
Trump's last trade war. What can explain this quite big difference? To answer that question, let's look at the two main determinants of the exchange rate.
Okay.
Trade and finance.
Yes.
First, the value of a currency is determined by trade. If a country imports more than it exports, it will need to buy foreign currency to do so. This will reduce the value of its own currency. So by reducing imports, tariffs can increase the relative value of a currency. For example, last time Trump reduced how much the US imported from China, causing the value of the dollar to increase in comparison to the renminbi. However, this time, despite falling imports compared to exports, the dollar fell. Why did this happen? This gets us to the second determinant of exchange rates: finance.
And this is the kind of the difference between these two things is the fact that you had, when Trump's first in there, 2016 to 2020, you don't have a preceding semi-financial crisis with like the COVID stuff, giant, incredible inflation because you have an enormous increase in spending, all of that type of stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's not, you would not expect, if you're going to be legitimate, if you're going to look at the economy holistically, you would say, all right, like if he does the exact same thing he did in 2016, it's not necessarily going to have the same effect because you're dealing with a different set of circumstances.
Let's look at an example. If I, as a European, want to invest in the New York Stock Exchange, I'll need to buy dollars with my euros to do so. So foreigners investing in America tends to increase the relative value of the dollar. Citing Trump's chaos, foreign investors, though, have increasingly been looking to invest in relatively stable places like Taiwan, Switzerland, and the euro area, rather than in the United States. If this effect was bigger than the trade effect, it could perfectly explain why the dollar dropped rather than increased this time around. This gets us to our final expected effect of the trade war. Trade wars are bad for business, so it makes sense that the US stock market collapsed after Liberation Day. However, today, US financial markets are back. How is that possible? Well, essentially, I found two explanations. The first is that Trump recently passed his so-called Big Beautiful Bill, which mostly was about massive tax cuts for wealthy Americans and corporations. This has offset some of the
richest 20% get an average $6,555 income boost in Trump tax bill. That's so small. They're the richest people in the world. They get $6,000 a year extra, maybe. That's hilarious.
The negative effects of the tariffs. The second explanation is that what some people on Wall Street have called the taco trade, where taco stands for Trump always chickens out. That is, if you look at this graph, yes, clearly average tariffs are quite high, around 17%, but that is quite a bit lower than what Trump imposed at an average of 27% or so right after Liberation Day when the stock markets collapsed. So after 6 months, the US economy has definitely suffered, but not by as much as expected right after Liberation Day. Does that mean that Trump was right when he said that trade wars are good and easy to win? Let's evaluate that claim by first having a look.
I mean, he's like trade wars are good and easy to win. If you're, the person who's got all the cards, yeah, sure. I guess that's true. And, if you want to swing your stuff around, then it kind of makes sense to, do that to try to get a better deal. I get it. I don't know. Again, I'm like, with Trump, whenever he's talking about these types of things, you can't actually look at it as if he's making a statement of truth. He's making a statement of positioning. He's trying to say something that puts him in a good position. So it's like, yeah, like, of course, trade wars are good and they're easy to win. He doesn't necessarily actually think that. Maybe he does. But he doesn't necessarily actually think that. It's entirely possible that he's just, he's saying that for optics. He's saying that so that, people don't freak out. And he's saying it to, kind of uh, intimidate his opponents. It's like, yeah, like go nuts, man. Uh-huh. Oh, what? I'm sorry. You gonna try to come at me with a trade? Yeah, okay. Good. Yeah, go ahead. Go nuts.
Look at the rest of the world. What 6 months of tariffs did to the global economy. Now, of course, the world is too big to tell you about all effects Trump's trade war had on every country. Therefore, I decided to focus on the US's 5 biggest trading partners, the EU, Canada, Mexico, China, and Japan. For each of these, I have 1 to 3 surprising, sometimes even positive takeaways. But before getting into each of these, I just want to get out of the way that Trump's trade war is bad news for every major global economy for 2 reasons.
Yeah.
The first is that tariff uncertainty is making it difficult for firms to make investment decisions all around the world. What tariff rate should investors use to make their decision to build a factory somewhere? Yes, this uncertainty is hurting US growth, but it is also hurting growth everywhere else. The second reason,
which is not necessarily a bad thing for the US, because it's like, if you're looking at these things in terms of like competitiveness, how much more competitive is the US getting than other nations? If this was just hitting the US economy on its own, that was the only thing that was happening, then all of these other nations look way more attractive to invest in. But if it's hitting everybody, not necessarily equally, but if it's hitting everybody, that uncertainty means that, the US is not losing competitiveness. And if that's the case, then, with it being still like the world's superpower, it still remains that. And therefore, it's still the safest bet. So it's kind of like that instability weirdly does tend to make the US look like a better place to invest in, because it's the more, it would be reasonable to think that it would stay on top if it's already on top, just historically speaking.
the trade war is bad for other economies is that, as we've discussed, Trump was right that foreigners are indeed paying a substantial share of the tariffs. Yes, American importers technically pay the tariff, but after 6 months we have seen that many foreign firms, like for example Japan's car makers, have lowered their prices substantially to keep their market share in the US. This means less export revenue for these countries. So, with that obviously negative effect out of the way, let's get into some surprising ways key trade partners have responded to Trump. Starting with the biggest, the European Union. Coming into the trade war, Europe's aging economy was performing quite weakly. However, so far, Trump's trade war has benefited the continent in 3 ways. The first is that Europe's financial markets suddenly looked quite stable compared to those in the US, prompting European stocks to outperform US ones for the first time in a long time. Second, by tying the threat of tariffs to military spending, Trump has pushed Europeans to raise their defense spending.
Which was absolutely a goal in terms of, Trump doing these things.
Benefiting the European economy in the short term. And finally,
and also, I think we could easily say if you're spending more of your own money on your defense, you're more defense minded. If you've got a stronger military, then you're probably a more secure country, which is probably better for everybody.
Facing trade barriers from the US, the EU realized that its most important trade barriers are actually still inside the bloc and set out to try to remove them. Of course, it is still uncertain whether or not the EU will actually do this and complete the single market, but Trump's actions are making this more likely than ever. Next, here are 3 key takeaways for the US's second biggest trade partner, Canada. First, Trump's hostility probably helped the Liberal Party to win the election.
Yeah, almost certainly that is the case. It does kind of suck, but also, I guess Canada wasn't hurting enough. If the bit of nationalism necessary to basically go, all right, the person that's going to go, you Trump bad dude, why are you talking about us? If that was it, if that was enough to overcome the years of the Trudeau Liberal Party, screwing you over, doing bad stuff to you, if that was enough to overcome it, then I guess you weren't hurting that bad. And, if that's the case, good luck to you.
Over the conservatives that were seen to be more aligned with Trump. Second, as a major energy supplier, Canada is actively trying to adapt its energy infrastructure to be less reliant on the US. This could make Canada more resilient in the future. Finally, third, much like the EU, Trump's aggressive conduct has caused Canada to take a long, hard look at its internal trade barriers between Canadian provinces.
So this is, I mean, like the general thing that I'm hearing from this is basically the fact that Trump has done these tariffs has kind of put pressure on all of these own nations to look after their own interests. And looking after their own interests makes each of these nations much more resilient in the long term because they're being more independent. And therefore, if they've got their own interests in line, they're probably going to be more stable places to be and live and all that kind of stuff. And they can, they can look after their own selves. This does mean that, if Trump was basically trying to foster a anti-globalist surge in all other nations and places, then he probably, if that was his goal, looks like he's succeeded. Now we might not like that in terms of certain nations because we'd go, okay, well, in like a multipolar world where in which, you have like, instead of there just being a one hegemon of the world like America, there's multiple ones. So you've got like, all right, you've got a big giant sphere of influence for the US. And then you've got a big giant sphere of influence for China. You've got a big giant sphere of influence for Russia, maybe, or India. Okay. In that world, certainly, yes, the US does not dominate as much. And, every country is therefore shopping around for the best deal. They're not just like, okay, the best thing that we can do is just curry favor with the US because the US is the dominant power. And if we've got the US on our side, screw everybody else. In a world where in which there's multiple powers to compete, they each kind of have to offer the best deal. Like you can't just like, it'd be one thing if like, okay, China becomes the new hegemon. They're the new top dog. They've completely replaced the US and they're the dominant, trading partner, economic power for the world. Then things are not looking good. But if it's like, okay, China is competitive with the US, all right, well, that's something. But, then they each get to compete. And each nation can kind of actually, do their own thing and decide what benefits them the most. And then if it's China and the US and India and Russia, well then hey, you've got a much greater world stage of competition here. And you're probably gonna, I mean, for me, I like that as like a libertarian. Like that it feels like a libertarian win. That we've got more competition and we've got more of an ability for everybody to look after their own interests. And, it feels like it's going to be a better deal for everybody. And kind of a return to normal history as opposed to this, experiment in globalism.
That the IMF has estimated are equal to about a 21% tariff internally. Again, just as with the EU, if Canada can now remove these thanks to pressure from Trump, he could have ended up doing them a major service. Interestingly, Trump's trade war could even benefit his third biggest trading partner, Mexico. Yes, the Trump trade war threatens Mexico's entire development model, where it tried to get rich by becoming a low-cost manufacturing hub for the US through its free trade deal with the US. However, so far Trump has somewhat respected that deal by only putting tariffs on goods that fall outside of the terms of the existing deal. The one upside for Mexico is that because tariffs on other nations were so low, its zero tariff free trade deal was really not that big of a benefit. However, now that US tariff rates against other countries are up by a lot, if Mexico can prevent Trump from leaving that trade deal, it may actually become the best low-cost manufacturing hub for firms that want to export to the US. Even for China, there are...
Okay, let me see what this says. Business leaders in Mexico say the incoming U.S. administration will enhance the appeal of their factories as an alternative to plants in China. That sounds kind of good. Like, again, like, who would you rather be benefiting? Would you rather Mexico be benefiting, or would you rather China be benefiting? Again, Mexico benefiting in the sense that it takes away factories and manufacturing from China and therefore kind of weakens China's position. Not bad. Not bad.
Manufacturing hub for firms that want to export to the US. Even for China, there are two bright spots. The first is that Trump's chaos is causing many countries to reconsider relying on the US too much, markedly improving China's image in the rest of the world. The second is that many experts have argued that
China calls Trump's new tariff threat a mistake upon a mistake and looks for opportunity in global trade war.
China's new trade deal with Trump does show that China has a stronger position than Trump expected. Finally, for Japan, Trump's threats may lower some of its incredibly outdated restrictions on food imports. For example, when it comes to rice, Professor Kenichi Ueda from the University of Tokyo estimates that Japan's barriers are equal to a tariff of 233% on rice.
Yikes, that's a lot.
As Trump remarked, it would actually make a lot of sense for Japan to reduce this as it is currently dealing with a major rice shortage. So while Trump's trade war has some upsides for all major trading partners, on average, Trump's trade war has damaged the global economy, putting it on a path towards multipolarity where trade wars become far more common. But according to Trump, all of this was necessary to reindustrialize the US and potentially earn the American government so much money so that it can lower taxes for ordinary Americans. So, was Trump right? When it comes to government revenue, we can see...
I think his initial idea was that the reindustrialization of America was probably not going to happen. If I remember correctly from his first video on this, was like, he was pretty skeptical, cynical that it was going to work. And I kind of do sort of agree with it. I'm not sure if it's something that really could work in, the world which we have it, the global market being what it is. I think there's definitely some industries and things that we probably should invest in, and like just do it, even if it's like a loss for us, like we're producing it more expensively than it would in China. It's like, all right, well, we'd rather have these things produced here. We'd rather like rare earth materials be mined in the US to give, the rest of the world another trading partner for these things, rather than China being the only person you can buy these things from. It's probably not a bad idea. And if that means that we're kind of rejiggering the economy to make those things happen, and we have to, move things around such that, some people get hurt, then it's probably in the long term not a bad idea. I understand that. Although it is, again, it's very difficult to actually make stuff like that happen organically, or inorganically for that matter.
In this graph by The Economist, that tariffs are definitely working in the sense that they are bringing in a lot more government revenue than was the case in previous years.
Okay.
But what does that mean in the wider context? The best estimate I could find is that in 2025, tariffs will raise $189 billion for the US government.
Okay.
However, meanwhile, Trump's big, beautiful tax cuts are projected to increase the U.S. deficit by $3 trillion. So yes, tariffs are bringing in a lot of money, but not enough to make up for Trump's massive tax cuts. Okay, but then what
now,
about
I think,
not the big, beautiful $1 billion?
Let me think. So is this $189 billion a year, like this year?
For the U.S. government. However, meanwhile, Trump's big, beautiful tax cuts are projected to increase the U.S. deficit by $3 trillion. So, yes.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, the deficit, this is because of the tax cuts. All right, so the tax cuts means that, the U.S. is taking in less tax dollars specifically because, they've cut that stuff. The tariffs are also saying, hey, look, we're projected to bring in this amount of money because of the tariffs. I don't know if the $3 trillion deficit increase is factoring in the potential for growth that the tax cuts are, projected to make happen. I don't know if that's in there.
Tariffs are bringing in a lot of money, but not enough to make up for Trump's massive tax cuts.
No, yeah.
Okay, but then what about the US's reindustrialization? Trump's main goal for the trade war was to make American manufacturing great again, which could be crucial for national security. That was his point, at least.
Yeah.
Is that working? So far, the answer is we don't know for sure. But it does.
Which does make sense because those types of things, like even if we wanted to, we were like, okay, every single manufacturing company is like, okay, yeah, you know what, we definitely have to build factories in the US. It's going to take a while for those things to come online. And, they might be like, you know what, we'll just bite the bullet and wait out these 3 years for Trump to get out. And, if the Democrats get back in and we go right back to this, globalist viewpoint of manufacturing and these types of things, it would have been stupid for us to, spend all this money to get these new factories in the US up and running. So, yeah, I mean, it's understandable to say, like, we don't know now because, they could be pushing for that stuff, but they could also just be, if down the line Democrats get back in power, they could easily just be like, yeah, we're just cutting and running on this. Like, we're not going to staff this factory anymore. We've got it up and running, but it's like, no, it just makes more sense for us to, leave our investment on the table. We'll ditch that and we'll go back to manufacturing everything in China.
Doesn't look like it yet. On the one hand, Trump has said that businesses practically committed $12 trillion in investments on his watch. That would be triple the number that businesses had invested in the entire last year in just the first 6 months.
Okay.
However, the problem with Trump's number is that many businesses seem to have told Trump that they will invest more thanks to him, but this included projects that they were going to be doing anyway.
Okay.
And if we look at business investments in new machineries and other so-called fixed investments in the data.
All right, this is falling business confidence. So obviously there's a huge dump around COVID. Bang, falls. And then it goes up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. So, I mean, it feels like, to be perfectly honest, it feels stable. Because, I mean, it's just so up and down. You would have to have a larger time frame to be able to actually like feel out any kind of real trend here. Because again, like if we're going to actually take this in terms of, if we're going to actually look at this in terms of averages, which is how you have to look at these charts, to me that looks like a stable line. That looks relatively stable. Maybe a tiny average decrease, maybe.
Well, we can see that the number for Trump's first 3 months was pretty good, but the number for the months after Liberation Day are the worst since the Omicron wave of the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
This is in line with anecdotal evidence that precisely because Trump is using tariffs as a negotiation tool, businesses of the type Trump wants to attract, factories are not investing at all. Neither in the US nor in the rest of the world, choosing to sit out the storm. After all, yes, very high tariffs against the rest of the world does make building a factory in the US to serve the US market more attractive. But then if these tariffs can be brought down at any moment due to Trump negotiating, your US factory may all of a sudden not be competitive anymore. And because it's taken years, if not decades, to make money back on investments in a factory, it makes sense that as long as Trump is negotiating, businesses are not investing in the US. Of course, 6 months is way too short of a time frame to truly judge Trump's trade war. But hopefully this video was still useful by providing a tariff overview, review of impacts on the US, on major trading partners, and a quick review of Trump's goals. We are seeing longer-term effects more clearly. I will give you an update at that time. So subscribe to stay in the loop. And in the meantime, if you want to know more about which products are most affected by the tariffs,
All right. So essentially, the main takeaway that I've got here, let's see if we can find. Go a little bit further. Doink, doink. Nope. All right. Essentially, the thing that I'm focusing on is the fact that economists really are not good at predicting what the economy is going to do. Like they're not really good at it. They kind of, expect certain things to happen, and then the reality doesn't fit their narrative. And like I said, I think a lot of this is just because economists can't actually. I mean, it sounds insane, but they can't predict what the economy is going to do. If they could, command economies would work. They don't, because it's too complicated, and every actor is an individual, and they have a better perspective on things that are happening to them and their circumstances, and therefore they change stuff up. So the idea right now is it would be, it would be better to build a factory in the US than other places because of the tariffs and these types of things. However, nobody wants to do it because they're not sure if these tariffs are going to stay in place. If, it makes sense to go ahead and do it now, do it later, or to just go, you know what, we'll lose money in the short term because, we think we think the Democrats are going to win down the line. And therefore, okay, we'll just basically just keep a hold of our investments. Now, at a point, that factory, that industry, that firm is going to go, all right, well, we're kind of losing money if we don't invest this into a new factory, because our old factories are, they're getting older. We're able to produce less from them. It takes more to maintain them, and they're lower technology, and therefore they're producing less. So we are actually like losing money by just relying on our older stuff. And potentially, that also raises the risk of, there being a general catastrophe in those things. And if those companies, if those factories blow up for whatever reason, we don't have anything to take the place of it. And that means that our competitors can swoop in and gobble up more of the market share and all these types of things. And these are all legitimate factors that all of these firms are weighing. And essentially, what this means is, like, right now, 6 months in, the companies are not feeling as much pressure. If, 3 years down the line, these things are still happening, even if Trump is like still negotiating on these tariffs, they basically are going to have to go, okay, unless it's like 100% in the bag Democrat victory, and the Democrats are promising to drop all of these tariffs and open, just go completely crazy with this stuff. They're basically going to have to go, all right, well, we just have to do it now. We have to invest in this stuff. And the second one company goes, all right, we're not waiting. We're just going to invest, and we're going to start building this factory. Every other company, every other firm, every other industry needs to basically follow suit. Otherwise, they're losing ground to those first adopters. So for right now, the overwhelming feeling that I get is the tariffs do seem to be working, contrary to what people were thinking. Obviously, look, there's pluses and minuses to all of these things. You have to figure out what you're willing to exchange. There's no solutions. There's only trade-offs. I'm a big believer in that. It's definitely the truth. But for right now, it seems like the trade-offs are probably going to be potentially for the best, again, for everybody. Every individual nation is now allowed to be much more of an individual, independent nation. That, to me, does not strike me as a bad thing. That kind of, again, from a libertarian perspective, I like that. I like that idea. And therefore, we've got a much more competitive global market as opposed to a unified globalist market. I kind of prefer that, partially because I think the US and, the Western ideals are going to win out. But I'm not sure. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Good luck in all your endeavors. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I'll say farewell for now. All right. And that was that video. All right. Now let's see. The next video that we got is the Gary Johnson. I keep saying Gary Johnson. No, I don't. I keep saying Gary Stevenson. Gary Johnson was a cool libertarian president presidential candidate who was also the governor of New Mexico, I think, or Arizona, one of the two. He seemed like a good guy. All right. Now, I think I do want to I'm going to record this one too. All right. So let's see. Is a wealth tax actually possible? Gary's Economics is going to explain, but I'll be totally honest, no. It's not. It's not possible. There's no possible way it's possible. Daniel Priestley lays out a fantastic overview of why these things are not going to work. That brought me back to my initial feelings on this, which is no. I mean, even if you were to carve out some specific proposal that is targeted at land taxes, something like that in the UK, the fact of the matter is it's going to destroy other industries such as farming, which has a large amount of their resources and capital tied up in the value of their land. If they're having to pay tax on the value of that land, they're not going to be able to. They're going to have to sell off that land, and essentially a whole bunch of foreign investors are going to gobble it up. They're going to destroy that industry completely. British farming is gone. And if you were to go, okay, well, we're going to make an exception for farming, for working land, land that is actually producing value, well, then guess what? All of the people that hold value in land, like, I don't know, the Duke of Cornwall or whatever, they're just going to convert their land holdings into working land holdings. They're going to go, okay, well, now this is an agricultural land. Instead of just being, a big giant garden or something, now it's a farm. I got llamas. Now I have an agricultural tax write-off, which guess what? That means that you're not redistributing wealth, which is the whole goal of this wealth tax. You're basically just introducing a tax that is putting more bullcrap laws in the books, that is basically just making the world a better place for lawyers that are doing tax evasion than you are actually allowing working class people to purchase assets. So I don't think there's any possible way these wealth taxes work. But you know what? I'm open to being convinced. I hope he's got legit, solid answers here. Practical, pragmatic answers, as opposed to a wishy-washy, you know what? If enough people want this stuff, we'll get it. Yeah, you can get it. It doesn't mean you're going to get what you want out of it. A wealth tax? Definitely. You could pass that for sure. Easy, no problem. Is that wealth tax going to redistribute resources amongst the population? I'm massively skeptical.
Correct implementation of tax policy is a job of experts and government and civil service. It is not the job of YouTubers. All right, so we'll do one on implementation of wealth taxes and how to reduce inequality. And the reason we have to do that is because we are increasingly doing really, really, really well on narrative. We are influencing what the media talk about. We're influencing the debate on this. We have a massive presence in the debate now. Governments are failing, especially the government here in the UK is really, really unpopular. They will have to do something or they will lose really badly in the next election. And increasingly, we are looking quite well positioned to be the way that they might have to turn. So they might come to us and we might get something. And what worries me is there is a phenomenal naivety at the moment in the way that people are talking about wealth taxes, basically. And basically, the people seem to think that the government can just turn around and say, okay, let's do wealth taxes, let's tax the rich now, and things will be fixed, right? The truth is, and I've always said this, I've never tried to hide this, actually raising taxes on the rich is going to be really, really hard for a variety of reasons, right? One of the biggest reasons is obviously they control a lot of the media narrative, they can sell a lot of...
Okay, again, I'm this is the kind of stuff that I don't care about. And again, the media narrative, they control the media narrative and these types of things. And I'm okay, dude, you're telling me that the media, which basically exists to provide information and or entertainment to the masses of people that are consuming it, they are somehow being funded entirely by wealthy people. All right? Unless I'm wrong, every study ever done on media and the news and these types of things is basically determined that they're left-leaning. They are not, like right-leaning. They're leaning towards a sort of progressive attitude, all right, which would be very amenable to like a wealth tax and these types of things. Especially, again, like even in Britain, especially in Britain, I should say, because British politics is like actually way more left-leaning than like American politics specifically. So I don't think the idea here is that, you know what, if a wealth tax was incredibly popular, the media that is controlled by these, shadowy wealthy elites, I'm not saying it's not, but these media conglomerates have to make money, right? And if everything that's getting them clicks and views is the wealth tax is a great thing, they're going to say the wealth tax is a great thing. Like that's just that's how they work.
Scare stories, if you tax us, we'll leave, or they can do a lot of sort of personally attacking of me as an individual. But the truth is, there are things they can do, and you need to deal with those things. Like the truth is, they can leave, right? And I've always said, and I constantly believe, look at the Abramovich situation, which shows like here's a rich man who tried to leave, and we just said, okay, well you can leave, but if you're going to own British assets, we can tax British assets. And that's always been my comeback to that, and that is true. But you need to make sure that you have your legal systems in place. Like people sometimes ask me, if you were Chancellor, what would you do? If you were Prime Minister, what would you do? And I always turn around and say, listen, goddamn, like it's not that easy. The implementation and the design, the correct implementation and the correct design of this tax or these taxes, it has to be so good. It has to be really, really good. And I think a sensible government at this point would be calling me. The sensible thing to do is to call me up and say, all right, look, we get it, right? We see, like the argument I'm making is correct. Inequality is increasing really, really quickly. The rich are rapidly increasing their wealth. It's squeezing everybody out. It's destroying the middle class. It's destroying the government. It's having and will continue to have like really destructive effects on living standards.
Okay, is the government being destroyed? He said that, the rich are sucking dry all the resources to the point that the government is being destroyed. Okay. I'm pretty sure it's something along the lines of 45% of like all spending in the UK is government spending. Okay, that seems like it's an enormously powerful force. Probably, I shouldn't say probably, definitely 100% for sure, the most powerful economic force in the UK is the UK government. Okay? And they have a monopoly on force. They can, if they wanted to, implement a wealth tax and say, you're giving us this money or we're going to put you in jail. All right? Like this Abramovich guy. Oh, you want to leave? You can do this? No, we're taking your stuff. We're taxing it. Yeah. If you're going to hold these British assets, we're taxing it. Okay, but like I'm not even going to be. No, we're taking it. It's ours. That doesn't feel like a useless, destroyed, demoralized system. That feels like a massively powerful apparatus that can do whatever the hell it wants. But for some reason, the rich are absolutely just pulling the strings out of everybody. Like it doesn't feel correct to me. Like who does it feel like the rich have their boot on your neck when the government is saying, yeah, if you want to watch YouTube, you need to give me your ID, give me your papers. Every time you want to get on the internet, anytime you want to watch a YouTube video, anytime you want to make a post on Facebook, yeah, make sure you have your ID, papers, please. Are the rich tech companies? I mean, obviously there's no tech companies in the UK, but is Mark Zuckerberg, throttling you and saying, give me all your information, or is that the British government? Feels like the British government's kind of relatively powerful. to me, just as an outsider. I don't know. Let me know what you think if you're living in the UK.
Standards, you need to fix it. Like 100%, you need to fix it. The only way to really do that is to aggressively increase taxes on the rich. The truth is that's hard to do. So they should be calling me up and saying, listen, okay, we see it. You know, you're right. We understand now. Okay, you don't deal with inequality, you're kind of fucked. But the rich are saying they're going to leave. We don't really, we don't think it's possible. You know what I mean? So then you call me up and you say, okay, all right, let's put the work in. We put the work in. We design this tax so that it's good, so that it's watertight. You know, you look at things like what China does. You know, China doesn't allow you to own a ton of Chinese wealth and live overseas. You ask the question, you realistically discuss the question, how much can the UK do by itself? Or realistically, do we need international cooperation? International cooperation is achievable. If you look at when we last significantly...
Okay, maybe. I'll let him go into it. I'm just speculating here. I'm probably going to be wrong, right? This guy's a genius. I really hate that I'm hating on this guy so much, but like this utopianism really does like make me just squirrel out and think that this guy's gonna get into power and there's gonna be a lot of suffering because of it, because this utopianism is just not, it never works out well. But I'm gonna speculate that he's gonna say, hey, look, we absolutely had international cooperation in terms of our tax policy and how we taxed other people. Okay, well, that was back when, you know, the UK, I'm assuming here, was a powerful international force. Was like, hey, we had a big giant military, we had an empire, we had the ability to exert power and influence across the globe, all over the place. We could do that. That's not the case anymore, okay? The way of the world right now, and this is also a legitimate criticism of the idea of a wealth tax, is that you're living in a much more globalized society and world, wherein which it's much easier for rich people to leave, to go elsewhere, to put all of their assets offshore, to move everything away at like the click of a button, basically, because it's all exists digitally now. And guess what? That means that if another country is like, hey, we want to raise some taxes, you know how we could do that? We can make our country more attractive to rich people because all these Brits want to get the hell out. Okay, we can just give them a slightly better tax deal than they would get in Britain. And guess what? They'll come here. That will raise our tax base because they're bringing the value that they're providing, and we're able to siphon some of that off as taxes. So why would another country cooperate with that when it benefits them to not cooperate and say, yeah, we're just going to give better tax deals to rich people? That makes our country better and wealthier because we can grab all of your millionaires. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. I mean, that's what I would do. I would be cheering this on. If I was the president of like Romania or something like this, I would be cheering this on and be like, UK, you absolutely need to do this wealth tax. You definitely need to do it. You definitely need to do this. Okay, guys, just make sure that we can grab some of these millionaires and these types of things. The UK, your wealth tax, absolutely, it's awesome. Wasn't that? I mean, like, doesn't that make any sense at all?
Reduced inequality. It was in the aftermath of World War II, and it was done internationally. Everybody.
Yeah. Again, World War II. I'm guessing that. I'm just trying to remember here. Pretty sure that after World War II, in which Britain just fought a big giant war, in which every other large industrial power was blown up because, you know, Germany invaded France, blew it up. Germany got completely flattened. Trying to think what other large industrial powers were there in Europe that could have competed and resisted influence. I mean, gosh, like the Soviet Union. Well, no, they were enemies. So they didn't really influence them that much, did they? The U.S. No, they were not really doing much with. them. Okay, I guess I was right in saying that the only time that the Great Britain could have exerted force would have been a time where they actually had more power to exert over other individuals, which is not the case they're in right now.
But did it together, and it worked. The truth is, this would be difficult for the UK, specifically the UK. I think a massive country like the US would probably have an easier time, especially when you consider...
Especially if you consider the fact that we already do that. The US already does that. If you're a US citizen and you have businesses elsewhere, you get taxed on them. Yeah, that happens.
How many of the billionaires and the massive companies are based in the US. I think the US would have an easier time to do it by itself. I think a country like the UK could do some things by themselves, but like, why do it by yourself? This problem is happening everywhere. We have a massive opportunity to build something internationally here. But there's this like real childish naivety, which is like, okay, fine, just give it like, the big thing that you see, and this I think really encapsulates the childish naivety that I talk about, is people turn around to me and they say, okay, all right, show me the tax policy then. Show me the tax policy. Listen, I'm here in my kitchen, right?
Okay, so I'm a genius. I am an absolute magician of the economy. I made millions of dollars just betting on society's collapse. I know how the economy works, okay? And that is evidenced by the fact that I made millions of dollars betting on the economy. Okay, I've heard this argument many, many times with people in my comments that, you know what, this guy is a reliable authority because he's made money on the economy. So therefore, he's a good, effective, correct economist. Okay. If he is now going to say, hey, look, man, I'm not a tax policy expert. I don't know how to do this stuff. Okay, you're either an authority and you know what the hell you're talking about, or you're just a normal guy who's talking about stuff that he's passionate about. Okay? You can't be both. You can't wear both hats. They're mutually exclusive. All right?
Which is real. Like with a massive YouTube channel, like I'm pretty obviously the world's biggest campaigner for wealth taxes, and I work hard, right? Do you think tax policies are usually made by YouTubers? Like, tax policy is not, we spoke about this in the tariffs video, right? Which is the Trump tariffs had this similar vibe, which is like some random intern, like, bashed it together, or Cambodia. I thought, yeah, Cambodia, you know what I mean? Like, what is this idiocracy behavior? Listen, if you want good tax policy, you need to pay good tax people, and you need to sit them in a room for a long time, and you need to make sure they design that policy.
He's cursing an enormous amount. Is it just me? It feels like he's like a little bit like turned up about this. He's like actually like mad that people are asking him for like practical, pragmatic solutions, like that actually have real rubber meets the road implications. Because I haven't watched every single one of his videos. Maybe he curses this amount normally, but it seems like he's like actually getting really like upset about this.
Even if I was the smartest guy in the world, you wouldn't want one guy to design. This is not do you remember that Little Britain, write the theme tune, sing the theme tune? It's like, like, all right, you're the campaigner, right? You make it yourself then. What have we become as a country? Like, listen, if you want good tax policy, you need to pay proper tax experts for their expertise.
Okay, do you think they're not hiring tax experts? Do you think they don't have tax policy people that are paid money? Again, 45% of spending in the UK is government spending. I would imagine they have some tax people that are probably paid pretty well, because if not, they can make money elsewhere, right? And that to me suggests that if they're not doing these wealth taxes, it's probably, maybe not, but probably because they've considered it and gone, yeah, that's probably going to blow up the economy rather than give us any good like tax revenue, or, give us a political victory, because we can say we redistributed wealth and we therefore made the working class, which is, like the majority of people. And guess what? Votes are numbers of people and not dollars. Kind of feels like they might have like dismissed this, or at the very least, considered it and gone, probably this isn't going to work. Maybe there's no tax experts in the government. Maybe there's no people making tax policy in the government. I guess.
And their time. And you spend 2 years designing the tax policy. Obviously. It's idiotic, this approach. Listen, I would be more than fucking happy to be involved in making sure this tax policy is designed well, obviously. But the way that you do that is you get the tax experts, you talk to me, you talk to the other guys, you build a team of proper good tax experts, you think about the question of how do we deal with people who leave the country? Can we still tax them on the UK assets? Like we did to Abramovich, like China does. You look at how these issues were dealt with in the past. You look at how wealthy...
Can I check here? I want to say the Abramovich guy was like a criminal. I'm going to check here. Abramovich, UK. Chelsea owner. Let's see. His delays in renewing it. Let's see. He's granted Israeli citizenship. He's being sanctioned. Oh, wasn't this guy... Wait a minute. He was like a... Yeah. His UK entrepreneur visa expired in 2018. Yeah, this is the guy who was a... What are we talking about? He was like a Russian citizen who bought up a bunch of stuff. Yeah. So he was not a UK citizen, it looks like. Am I crazy here? Because he has a visa. He has a visa here. So, not exactly like a UK citizen. Okay.
Inequality was reduced significantly in the 20th century. You have sensible discussions, but I'm constantly faced with these like idiotically simplistic discussions, which are totally bad faith, which is like, oh, okay, you've recognized that the ship's going to sink. Well, why don't you fucking fix the hole your fucking self then, you fucking idiot? It's this unbelievably childish and it's unbelievably chaotic. Like, listen, we're supposed to be adult, grown-up, mature countries here. I have correctly identified a massive problem in our economy that is going to devastate living standards if nothing is done about it. You need to fix that with well-designed tax policy, and well-designed tax policy takes experts, and it takes money, and it takes resources, and it takes hard work. So, and that is the message. That is the message. So listen, we're winning the debate, and it's not just because of me, but that's because I've been focused on winning the fucking debate. Okay. Implementation is going to be hard. And I emailed, just this week, I emailed Gabriel Zuckman, who is a French economist who I've got a lot of time and a lot of respect for. He's working on similar things. And I said to him, listen, dear Gabriel, we're winning the debate here. Who have we got working on implementation? You know what I mean? Because listen, I can't do everything by myself. You know what I mean? Correct implementation of tax policy is a job of experts and government and civil service. It is not the job of YouTubers, you know what I mean? And we need to win the debate, and we need to win implementation. And I want to be clear, right? I know I've campaigned for...
Okay, let's say you win the debate. Now, let's say that the policy you have built your narrative on is inherently flawed. Like, just for instance, Karl Marx wins the debate on economic policy in the Communist Manifesto, and a lot of people go, hey, yeah, you know what? All of this stuff sounds fantastic and great. That's the narrative. We're now going to implement it. Okay. Now, I would argue, and I think this is, borne out by the history, the implementation of that was always going to fail. So let's say that he wins the debate. Gary over here wins the debate on the wealth tax. And everybody who is shouting, this is not a good idea, they lose the narrative. But the fact of the matter is, the implementation, the idea of a wealth tax and these things, is just inherently doomed to failure. I wonder if the excuse for the failure of the implementation is going to be the same as the argument for why communism and socialism has failed every time it's ever been tried. It's been, well, that wasn't real communism. That wasn't real socialism. So you know what? The wealth tax that we did wasn't a real wealth tax. We didn't really get it right. It wasn't a real version of it. We didn't really do it correctly. But the idea was right. The idea was good. The idea was correct. The narrative was good. The story we told ourselves was good. And that's evidenced by the fact that it worked. It grabbed a lot of people's attention. Okay, but everybody is saying that this was just never going to work. Don't you think maybe your narrative might be attractive but wrong? The fact that you can win a narrative doesn't mean that your side is correct. It just means that it taps into something. It means that it gives people a reason to hope or a reason to hate. And that emotional resonance is enough to make them join you in your struggle against the bourgeoisie. And we're able to drag people out of their homes and streets and, do not great stuff to them. That, to me, feels like what's going on with Gary Stevenson here. I don't want to hate on the guy because I'm going to assume charitably that he really believes in this stuff and really wants it to work well. I will have to say I don't see it working. I don't see it working out. And I think the way in which if they were to try to implement this stuff, it were to work at all in any way, shape, or form, was if it was so watered down that it doesn't actually make any of the things that he wants to happen. So you can have a wealth tax, but you have to put in so many exceptions and you have to water it down to such a degree that it does not redistribute wealth. It does not make these finite resources like land and property more affordable and more available to working class people. Which means that now you still have the same narrative of like, well, we just need more wealth tax. We just need more. We just need more. We just need more. Okay, but if you have people that are doing the taxes, that are crunching the numbers, and they're going, well, this is what we can get done. This is the only stuff that works that would actually like retain any of these people that are paying, the vast majority of taxes in the UK, and we've got a ton of programs in the UK. We can't get rid of them because it's political suicide to even remotely mention like, okay, we're going to make cuts to the NHS. That's no one's going to say that. It's not possible. They can't do it. Okay, so you need a certain tax base to do that. And if we have this wealth tax that's going to eliminate, let's say, 10% of the top 1%, that means that you're losing something like 10, 15, whatever. You're losing like, 10% of your total tax revenue income. Okay, well, what are you going to do? Because you can't make cuts to anything. You can't do that. You have to balance that budget somehow, right? Or you're going to basically say, all right, well, we're going to just finance this with debt. Okay, well then isn't debt kind of also like an economic collapse? You're looking for at a hyperinflation or all kinds of other, like massive depressions. Okay, isn't that worse? Yeah, there's so many things in here that make me think that I would not want to trust that this guy's going to do it right. I don't know. I understand the feeling of you want to just have somebody there who's going to make the bad stuff go away. Unfortunately, the world you live in is, it's not fair, it's complicated, it's rough, and sometimes the bad stuff doesn't go away. And if it does, it happens slowly and imperfectly. But so looking at this guy, I find him kind of like a messianic cult leader type personality, which again, I mean, I keep like just absolutely hating on this guy. I don't mean to. It's just I think he just rubs me the wrong way.
2% on wealth of above 10 million, you know, that's what I do, that's what patriotic millionaires do, that would be good. But like, this is not like I've sat down and picked the perfect tax policy. And people sometimes criticize me like, oh, that form of wealth tax is not good, we need another form of wealth tax. I'm here for that. Like, let's have those discussions. Let's build a tax policy, you know. But this kind of really stupid shutting down of the debate is, oh, you've correctly identified that our economy is going to be devastated. Well, why don't you fix it? We need to grow up, basically. We need to grow up. But you know, the reason I'm here and
it feels to me like adults would be asking practical questions as opposed to, you need to just trust me, man. You need to just trust me. Just trust me, bro. Okay? Yeah. Grow up. Why are you asking for practical, pragmatic solutions that have real rubber meets the road, numbers, projections? I need to actually, you know, figure out if my business can afford this kind of wealth tax before I vote for it. I'm thinking long term. I'm thinking about things in terms of real practical realities of the day. Nah, man, grow up. All right? Just trust me. Somebody else will do it. We got tax experts. They'll get it. Okay. Feels like you're kind of being a little bit childish here. But I'll grow up. I'm sorry.
Finally done a video on implementation is because we're winning the debate. And I'm really proud of myself, and so should you be, the work you put on it, and so should everybody watching, because this, what I think is really interesting about like our like increasing narrative victory here is people go on TV. So like when like, it's Neil Kinnock is his name, right? Is it Neil? When he went on TV recently and he was like 2% wealth tax above 10 million, that is exactly the wealth tax that I campaigned for, but he didn't say Gary Stevenson wealth tax. And he probably didn't hear it from me, right? Like, and we don't have a massive presence in the mainstream media. Like, the way that we do this is we feed it into the public, and it comes up from the public to the newspapers and to the politicians, and like, I think it's kind of inspiring to show how much power the public has if they stick to a message, right? And if they're very clear on it. It shows that, like, you know, a YouTuber, you know, it's not just me, you know, I mentioned before, Patriot Millionaires and all these other guys who do their good work.
I can't believe the rich people allowed that anti-wealth sentiment on the air. How was he allowed to mention that in the media? The guy, the rich person media narrative wrangler must have been asleep that day.
We can drive it up. We can drive it up through the people. But then, you know, if politicians turn around and say, oh, okay, great, listen, you know, we're not going to provide the policy, you know. And we were speaking this week about, you know, maybe we could try and get some funding to get some tax. Like, I'll be honest with you, I'm busy here, you know what I mean? And it's stressful when I'm doing a lot of work, and I'm really focused on narrative, and I think the work that we do here is really, really, really vital. So we were thinking about like getting some experts in to fund tax, to actually work on implementation and trying to get some money for that. But the honest truth is, it shouldn't be our job. It shouldn't be our job. And I know, like, you know, I do a lot of jobs that shouldn't be my job, but I would like to do a shout out to like governments.
No, I mean, he's correct. I will absolutely, you know, give him props here. It shouldn't be his job to do that. I agree. His job is to be a YouTuber. His job is to get clicks and views, and he's doing a great job at that. However, he's getting clicks and views basically by preying on people's despair and hopelessness and getting them riled up to do something. And then his answer of like, all right, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, talk about the stuff that I talk about, subscribe, and do all that. I'm like, that feels a little bit empty. Feels like you could have just, you know, like done something that was entertaining if you wanted to get clicks and views, as opposed to, I'm trying to create a political movement, but it's a political movement in which it's not my job to have any like political, like actual proposals. Okay. I'm just making a big giant political movement that's going to be incredibly, aggressive and vital and pushing all kinds of stuff. It's just that the things that we're pushing, I mean, it's just like a nebulous, hey, we want like better stuff. Okay, I mean that's a great slogan. Obviously, it's rallying a lot of people behind you. But if you don't have anything to actually focus them on, it's just an empty cult of personality. Right?
Not just here in the UK, right? Because it's an international problem. Governments, and real governments that want to fix the problems, you need to fund the policy on tax work on this. Civil services across the country, including this country, think tanks. Listen, I'm working my tits off out here. Get your best people working on how we do this. And, I would love to help. And, if the UK government was to call me, I'd definitely make time for it. This is not Gary Stevenson saves the world, we need other people helping to design this. I'm 100% aware, and I've always been aware, effectively implementing tax on the richest people will be hard. I've never, ever, ever said anything else. And I know it was hard. And I knew from the start it would be hard. And if I'm honest, I never thought we'd get as far as we have already come. But I don't do this because it's easy. I do this because it's essential. This is as simple as that. It's as simple as that. If you don't want your country to collapse into poverty, you have to deal with this. We've got the people, we've got the experts, get them in a room together, pay them what they need, and get that tax policy sorted and give it the time it needs. And I would like to see, this is not a UK specific problem. I want to see politicians and economists and civil servants in Germany, in Italy, in Spain, in France, in Japan, in Australia. I would say America, but we're not likely to get them. Oh, and Canada, because they always complain that I don't mention them. And New Zealand, get a lot of those. Listen, what I'm looking for is like ruthless practicality and pragmatism.
Okay, yep. Ruthless practicality, pragmatism, but actual political proposals, I mean, like, I'm not going to do that. Somebody else is going to do that. Okay? I'm looking for incredible, laser-focused, precision policy proposals, not from me, from somebody else. Okay, fine. That are definitely going to work. Okay, what if some people are raising legitimate, ruthless, practical, pragmatic problems with this type of stuff and they don't agree with you? Well, they're just fucking rich, boys. Isn't that right? Yeah, I'm sorry. I just immediately start cursing the second I do the accent, so I can't do it. Dude, you're all over the place here. Okay? Either you're a movement and you're just, hey, I'm just here to gather people. Okay? That's it. That's what I'm here to do. That's what he seems like he's here to do. He's here to, grab enough people and voices to basically be able to point them at a thing. The thing is that he doesn't have anything to point them towards. He doesn't have, I want all of you people in the UK who are subscribing to my channel to vote yes on Prop 342. Prop 342, I don't know if they do propositions in the UK. Prop 342 means that there is going to be a 1% wealth tax on land over 1,000 hectares that is not working agricultural land. Okay, that is a political proposal and solution, and you could have an effect on that. That would be a thing. But he's like, yeah, no. I'm not doing that, mate. No, not me. That is not ruthless practicality and pragmatism. Let's go back.
What I'm looking for is like ruthless practicality and pragmatism. Yeah. How do we effectively get wealth back from the very rich, or at the very least, stop them from taking more of our wealth, which has an understanding of the fact that a lot of those rich are domestic, but a lot of those rich are also overseas. And they're immobile. And how do we deal with that? That is a thing that can be dealt with. It's been dealt with in the past. It can be dealt with again. And I will always say, when people say it's not possible, it was done in the 20th century. It was done in the 20th century. Inequality was reduced massively, and we should look at how they did that.
On international corporation, there is a minimum corporation tax now that was...
Yeah, I mean, that's Gabriel Zucman. I'm pretty sure that's Gabriel Zucman. I'm not the only guy out here. I'm very visible. I've chosen the YouTube strategy. But I mentioned Rebecca Gowland and Patrick Millionaires, Gabriel Zuckman.
All right, so he's going to go into this stuff. Basically, the thing that I'm dealing with here is I don't think he actually is legit in terms of wanting to make these things happen. Maybe he does. In fact, you know what? No, I'll say that he actually wants these things to happen. The problem is that he finds the idea of anyone, criticizing the fact that he's not offering real, practical, ruthlessly pragmatic, practical solutions and proposals an insult. It's like, no, man, like we're kind of actually trying to get this stuff to work. If you wanted these things to actually happen and work, you would have to have some way in which they could be done. Okay? You've won the narrative. I think that's fair to say. You have a lot of desperate people that are looking for any kind of something to shoot for, to look for. And you can point them towards stuff now. So if that's what you want, you should be going, yeah, you know what? We're done. We're done with being a, influence movement. I'm just trying to get views and clicks. I've got enough people. I've got a block of, UK citizens that can make this stuff happen. We can sway elections. Now we need proposals to make this stuff happen. But it just seems crazy. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm like, I think he does kind of rub me the wrong way because he's asking the moon while also being like insulted if people ask, well, how do we get there? How do we get to the moon? We just got to get there, man. I don't like it. Do let me know what you think down in the comments. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Good luck in all your endeavors, especially if you're in the UK. Good luck in all your endeavors. And I shall say farewell for now. All right. Minty, what's going on? Yeah. I'm sorry I didn't say hello. I did see your Ola, but I wanted to finish the video I was making before I said hello. How's it going? What's going on? Do you know this guy? Do you know Gary Stevenson, Gary's Economics? Mm. Mm-hmm. Ugh. And let's see. Who else do we have in here? Yeah, I got this guy. Yeah. I think, like, he seems to be really popular in the UK specifically. But I've seen him jump up on a bunch of stuff. I don't know why. For whatever reason, I think YouTube might think that I'm in the UK because it feeds me a lot of UK-specific content. But let's see. Who's that? He's like So Gary Stevenson is like an economist. No, I shouldn't say he's an economist. He's not an economist. He's basically he's a YouTuber. He made some money in the markets. He was like a stockbroker, and he made some money on that. And now he's a YouTuber, basically saying that the UK economy is going to collapse, which it probably is. But his solution for it is like a wealth tax, which I just, don't think is at all doable. I don't think it works. Which is kind of what we had. I think you were here for that. Like when we had the Daniel Priestley guy from Trigonometry on there, and he was just going through all the ways in which, wealth tax is not really going to work. And if you were to implement it, it would have horrible consequences. Yeah. Dang. Mm-mm. And then, let's see. I just saw this video pop up as I was looking through stuff. The VShojo Executives Exposed, which I also do kind of want to look at for, seeing what's going on with this. Because we made a video about this. I don't know if I actually ever posted it. Oh, it was the funniest part when the guy got skipped. Oh, yeah. That was some good stuff. Yeah. Oh, yeah, and I also wanted to ask, do you said you were going to go stream. Do you stream on Twitch? Or do you stream on YouTube? Because I tried to look at like YouTube stuff and I didn't see anything. Mm-hmm.
So here we go. This all comes down from a post by MTD over here, Mutendo, right? Who is a former executive C-suite level with Fishojo. And what is glorious?
You have Twitch. Yeah. That's what I was thinking. Yeah, I don't think, because I was going to say like, hey, like I'll raid in or something like that. I can't do it on YouTube. And I don't know if I have enough like internet capabilities to do. Yeah, you do have a YouTube channel. I definitely checked that out. I was thinking I would try to raid in, but I was like, I don't know how to do it. I looked into it. It's actually like way more difficult. And I actually don't even know if I can do it with the setup that I have. But yeah, I did look at your stuff. So you're kind of like, so this is maybe relevant to you because you did, unless I'm mistaken, you do some like VTubering stuff. Yeah. Yeah. So this is kind of about like, you know, some VTuber studios, the VShojo stuff with Iron Mouse. Yeah. So I do kind of want to, I'm just curious because this is like still going on. This is like hilarious gossip stuff.
Glorious about this is this is hit with a community note almost immediately. Now, in this community note reads, Mutendo actively harassed and defamed talents during his time at Vishojo and after. He fails to address this important issue in the document or the fact that he deleted tweets claiming ignorance of their internal issues. So this is a fun one. Here is the document, the Google
Doc. You went on VR chat.
My time at Vishojo. Okay. I'm going to be reading this, and I will stop. I will comment. So he starts with, hey all, before we get started, I just want to take the chance to thank all of my friends, former talent, former staff, and other streamers in the industry that I've been in communication with who know myself and my role within the company. You've all been wonderful through this tough time. I also want to thank the many, many people within the community who have been supportive throughout this time and have stood with me while this gets sorted. I've spent the following month gathering countless documents and what I...
Okay, I maybe won't go through this whole thing if he's just going to read this entire thing. Let's see. Actions against Vishojo. I'm more than willing to do what I can to assist. All right, let's see.
You have. If MTD wants to clear his name, he needs to drop it all. All of the conversations with Gunrun, not the clips. Right? Now you can censor out confidential information, so people's personal information, stuff like that. It needs to be all out. That all needs to be dropped. I have also considered, saying right here, taking my own shareholder action against a company, which I won't rule out. Well, there you go. I also have to consider action against those that have engaged in defamation, although I'm hopefully they can resolve privately. And this is good. This is good. I think that you should reach out. And if you feel like somebody is defaming you, this is actually smart. So I'm going to give him some credit on this. If you feel like somebody is defaming
reading
you,
for real, like I would read it, but I'm just like, I don't want to watch somebody else read it. That feels like that feels like too lazy. It's one thing to be like, you know, watching somebody else's 20-30 minute video, but if all they're doing is just reading documents off of it and they're not like a anime fox girl or something like that, it's just like, that's so lazy. That's got to be like the worst possible thing you could do. Yeah. So, and again, I'm like, I am more looking for his sort of like legal stuff. I'm not looking for him to read this big, giant, huge document.
To pay for stuff. So he probably had some way to pay, but he may not have had access to like how much money was in the bank account. Sure. What I've been made aware of is that the company was running out of money and needed another round of investment to continue operations, so they were operating on loans. As far as my understanding, the only individuals who had access to company bank accounts were the CEO, the COO, and the finance department. As far as he knows. And that might be true. But what this means is the entire finance department, the COO, and the CEO are on the line. So yes, it's not just Gunrun. It's not just Gunrun, but at a minimum, it's the COO and probably the entire finance department, if not at least the head. Okay, let's continue down. So, you know, he was at CTO and CMO. So I oftentimes will say C-suite level. So C-suite level. What that means is you are a chief. Typically, in a corporation, at that level, everybody talks to each other about stuff. Now, are there exceptions? Yes. But the default is that these people are typically talking to each other. And typically there's gossip that will get around or word that will get around, etc.
Oh, yeah.
So the thing is, if he was at the C-suite level, it's hard to believe he really didn't really know anything or have a feeling that something was going to happen. Now, maybe he didn't know all the details, maybe, but at that level, it's hard not to know. It's hard not to know. So that's when I say C-suite. I mean,
yeah, because I mean, like, you know, even if you were like the CTO or the CMO or something like that, you would have to know, like, if the company's having troubles, if they're like, hey, we can't get, you know, any money to do this marketing initiative, or hey, we can't buy new technology stuff, we can't be doing blah, 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 all that type of stuff. That would have to be like, okay, well, like, are the people getting paid? Like, are we making sure that all of their charity stuff is going through? Like, do we have issues here, there, and elsewhere? I mean, it could be possible that, you know, some of these things are super siloed, and, you know, if there is like some actual like culture of secrecy going on, that does happen. Like the whole, God, what was his name? Bernie Madoff. Bernie Madoff had like his sons involved in the company, and they were like high up, and basically no one in his company knew that one division was like just a complete, you know, it was the running the Ponzi scheme. And that's where he made all of his money, stole all of his money. And, you know, apparently, I don't know if this is true, but apparently none of the other people who worked in the company knew that, you know, there's a big giant Ponzi scheme. And this is backed up by the idea that, or the fact that when Warren, bleh, I want to say Warren Buffett, but it's not Warren Buffett. Bernie Madoff tells his sons, hey, you know, there's like a, you know, this is a scheme that's going on. They immediately go to a lawyer, and that lawyer is like, hey, you have to tell people because this is like an ongoing criminal conspiracy. And if you do not immediately come forward, you're party to that conspiracy. So it's possible that they didn't know. Yeah, so it's possible he didn't know, but yeah, I think for most companies that's not going to be the case, especially for something like this. This is like a new company; they're all friends and stuff. They were all like together on stuff. So my guess is, yeah, they were talking about this kind of stuff. Oh my God, he stole. That's not good. Yeah, I can't stand when people steal. It's not good.
CEO, the CTO, and CMO. He was not the CEO, to be fair. And I have never said he was the CEO, right? The change in position was due to an internal company pivot in which the directors of the company assigned the role of CTO to another staff member and subsequently assigned myself to CMO. I now believe, based on the findings, the information presented to me was untrue. Once again, I do think he's being very favorable to himself here. However,
obviously,
despite the fact he's being very favorable to himself, he may not be completely lying, right?
Yeah, that's probably true. Especially if he's like talking to a lawyer or something like that. You know, he's going to make sure that he doesn't incriminate himself.
By then, they already owed money. So here's the problem. They should have cut staff a long time ago. And I'll actually take these off for a second because I know don't have too much video. So we'll free the ears. But they should have cut that cost a long time ago.
Oh, yeah.
Back in December, back in January, you know, back before. They should have freed those people up and let them go and then got those resources back. So from May 15, 2025,
not trying to
all
hear him
my
read.
access to company
Definitely
email was
not.
revoked. That's normal. That's standard. And I deported every server, Slack, and company-related software to move it on to a personal endeavor.
Again, because somebody's just going to have like, I mean, I can literally just like ChatGPT. I mean, I don't like ChatGPT. I like Copilot better, but you know, be like, hey, give me a summary of this. I don't need this guy to read it. I want his legal expertise, which is maybe not even something that he's going to do because this is just, you know, like a clip from a stream that he's doing.
TF for Mutendo personally. Listen, bro. Why or how did you know to ask about this? Was it because people told you? Because that means you
That
had
you
an
knew.
inkling of what was happening. If in that month, Mutendo is he's asking people at Vishojo, and he said he left every company, company group chat, everything else. That means he had information to know there was something going down. Right? You don't ask a very specific question about this unless you had some sort of idea. That came from somewhere. He didn't just magically say this. You don't just magically say company dissolution, like randomly, like, oh, hey, buddy, is your company dissolving? So I was told to check in after Anime Expo. So why didn't he show me that? So here's the thing. Why not show the whole conversation? If Gunrun told him that,
literally me when I was in school and I had to read. I would skim through every page and said I read it. I would do... I'm trying to think if I would do the same thing. I wouldn't skim. What I did was I would read a page or two to get like the flavor, to get like the sort of like the way in which it was written. And then I would read the like summary, like a Spark Notes. You're probably too young to remember Spark Notes, but whatever, like something along those lines where it's like it just gives you a summarization of the chapter and that kind of stuff, so you knew the basic facts of what happened, and then you can get the flavor from reading a page or two. Good to go, baby. I was able to talk about everything, and didn't read any of it, which is probably not great, but it was also like, look, man, that's why I'm kind of always so skeptical of having like literature classes in school, because if you're being forced to read these things, like I probably would actually enjoy reading like the Iliad. I've been assigned to read the Iliad or the Odyssey like 8 times. So I should have literally read the Iliad like 5 or 6 times. And like it's a cool book. It's like old school Greek mythology. It's a war story. I've never read it. And I honestly don't know if I'll ever read it in my entire life, just because it was assigned so often. You know? It's like you're assigning me to do work. Even if that thing is something that I actually like to do, if you're forcing me to like play video games at like the cost of like, hey, this is your livelihood, you better play freaking video games. I feel like at a point in time you're going to end up hating video games. You're going to hate playing them. I say that as I'm streaming. But seriously, man, like it's just I don't know, man. But yes, like reading, I like reading, but I have to like, I feel like I have to have some agency in reading.
Sanders is on the hook. So Daniel Sanders, Justin Ignacio, Gunrun, and now Dudu, whatever his real name is. And obviously his real name's going to come out. His information is going to come out. He's on the line here because he's an agent for Gunrun, who's the CEO at the head of the company. The CEO is always liable, but if you're told to do something and you do it, you're on the hook for that. So he's going to be deposed. And his identity is very important. And I know
you only read if you felt like it. Yeah, I agree. I would read some books if like I'd already read it and I knew I liked it. The problem was that I would like, I don't know, like read ahead of the class or something like that. I was just like, yeah, I was never, I want to say I was never on task. That's not true. It was just not great. All right. So let me see if he has like a wrap up here. Just give a little TLDR.
With not to mention, I would like to see the contracts.
Okay.
And I would like to see the meeting transcripts. So if he wants to, if Mutendo, if you want to upload the transcripts and the contracts, your boy will take a look. Your boy will take the look. Okay. I'm happy to look at that. And if you really are anti-Gunrun, you're not going to give a damn about them threatening you with NDA or anything else.
Right.
You're going to take it to the paint, drop the contracts.
A lot of books in school are boring.
Let me take a look. Let's all take a look.
And I mean, I've got like gross takes on that, which is just like the reason why so many of these books get assigned in school is not because they're good. And to be honest, a lot of those books are not even like good in real terms. They're good if you're trying to be like an English major. They're good to write papers on. I don't even know if that's true. They're just basically like, they were the books that were assigned to you in college. You had to read them to get your degree. And therefore, you're so pissed off that you had to spend like 3 months reading The Great Gatsby that you're passing it on. You're like, no, 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 no. Actually, this book is really good. I spent 3 months reading it. It couldn't have sucked. I would never waste my time reading a book for 3 months that sucked. Obviously, it's really good. It has to be really good. And you know what? Because it's really good, everybody should read it. I'm gonna make sure that all of my high school students, they all read it too. So they're gonna read The Great Gatsby and they're gonna love it just the same as me. Okay? Because I definitely wasn't forced to do it. This book definitely didn't suck. It was actually really good. I think that's the majority of books in school. Like the majority of books that were not like wildly popular movements, like a Charles Dickens doesn't count because I mean his was like massively popular with everybody. But like a Great Gatsby, I'm like, who the hell, like who read legitimately? Who read In Cold Blood by Capote, like Truman Capote? Nobody. Nobody read that thing. Okay, like a couple weirdo part of like the intelligentsia people read that stuff. I tried to read that. It's horrible. It's unreadable. It's trash. It's garbage. It's terrible. It's literally like pulling teeth. It's so bad. And yet it's like, oh my god, it's the best thing ever. I'm like, no, man. Like you didn't read this. Or if you did read it, you did it in duress. And you were basically, after the fact, you think to yourself, I didn't just waste my time reading this. I did it because it was really good. People do that with all kinds of stuff, by the way. When they have a job that it's like, oh, like I was pulling, crap out of, a dump and you get paid like nothing for it. You're basically like, oh, you know what? It was actually really fun to do this because otherwise you just wasted your time. You just completely did a horrible task for no reward whatsoever. No, man. I did it because it was in my heart. I love doing it. Nah, man. No, you actually suck. The one kid that has to read, be like, get the frick out of the room. I'm playing Minecraft. Oh, yeah. It's not good, dude. All right, so we'll go to the next one. I thought this was going to be a little bit more of his, like, fast facts video. It was not. No, this is no. Maybe he'll do another one on the VShojo update. Let me see if he's got one. I don't think he's got anything on the VShojo stuff. No, he doesn't. That's fine. This is the other one that I was going to watch. I think this will probably take us roughly till the end of the stream today. This is the Based Camp with Simone and Malcolm Collins. Now this was I watched a little bit of this video and I just thought it'd be hilarious to react to because it's essentially like the title here is The Data. Women may have broken Western civilization. Good morning, Rax. How's it going? Did you just wake up? Yeah. But I thought this video was hilarious because it's like, all right, we're looking at a day. Like people have said for years that like the fall of Western civilization came when women got the vote, and usually they're saying it to kind of like troll. They're saying it because it's like, it's not real. It's just like a joke. It's not, they're not serious about it. They're just saying it because it gets a rise out of people. Going great. How about you? I'm doing all right. Can't complain. Weather's nice. But yeah, so like people like they say it because it gets a rise out of people, but the other side of it is like there's a hint of truth there, which is to say that like the political narrative, the discourse, and the people that win elections now, is different because, you now have this big, giant extra voting block that comes in that has different values. Like biologically, you're programmed a little bit differently in terms of behavior and intuitions as, a woman than a man. And therefore, your political leaders are going to change. And if your political leaders change, well, your political, initiatives are going to change. And, that might be good, that might be bad, but they are going to change. And I mean, we're right now, obviously, in a specific point in the world where, maybe these things have kind of like shook out. Like we've kind of gotten rid of some of the kinks, and maybe we're going to, readapt and be able to like, solve some of the issues that come with, this large change, this big new thing of like, okay, now everybody's voting, women and men. They have different values. They have different things that they are really, that are really important to them. And, we'll basically try to implement that societally such that, everybody gets the good stuff and the bad stuff. Or gets all the good stuff, and we, negate as much of the bad stuff as possible. But it might not work. And that's what this data is apparently going to tell us. So let's see it.
Hello, Simone. Today we are going to be discussing how women destroyed society. And
because of course they did.
Yeah.
Of course they did. No, actually,
Hilarious.
So people, they go on our podcast and they might think we're going to do one of our sort of bait and switch things here, where I'm like, well, women cause some problems, no. And especially
no, you're like, but actually no, seriously.
words, I'm going to be going over somebody else's piece, so no one attribute this to me. I'm just saying it's worth talking about this piece. A lot of graphs and statistics shows how society began to fall apart with the rise of the feminist movement and women participating in politics and the labor force. And usually I'm not like particularly compelled by these sorts of cases if people know me.
For real.
In this instance, I found it compelling. But what's interesting is the entire piece, if you didn't like wade through the first part, which I'm not going to share with you guys because it's boring, and the title, you wouldn't know that that's what the piece is. The piece is Progress Studies in Feminization. Okay? And then the subtitle is You Can't Undo Just One Part of the 1960s. And it's by one of our favorite writers for this show is Arctotherium.
He's fun. Oh, and he also, he's definitely, it's women's fault. So, okay. Okay, Arcto, fine. Let's hear your theorem.
Yeah, and the broader thing is, and I'll note here, I'm not saying all women are a danger to society. I'm just saying non-autistic women are a danger to society.
Thanks, Malcolm.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on that. Yep. It's completely uncontroversial take.
Women like my wife are fine. You're a sweetheart.
Well, just to do basic female functions, I have to take the same amount of hormones as a trans woman, so can we really call me female?
Right, yeah. So here I'm going to pop on screen a graph that was in this first rambling bit he did, which is the Henry Adams curve of energy consumption. And it's supposed to go up logarithmically, but actually what we can see.
All right, what is the Henry Adams curve? I don't know what that is. Henry Adams curve. Tell me, brave AI. Not the autistic women? Yeah. All right. The Henry Adams curve is a historical trend line identified by American historian Henry Adams, which describes a long-term, approximately 7% per year growth in the usable energy available to human civilization. Okay, a trend observed since at least the 17th century with the advent of steam power. This growth, often measured by the amount of physical force or horsepower humanity could command, accelerated dramatically from the 1800s onward, reflecting the rapid progress of the Industrial Revolution. Adams noted that by 1900, the rate of societal change and the total power humanity could harness had increased by a factor of 1,000 compared to 1800. This trend is sometimes broken down into components: 3% population growth rate, 2% increase in energy efficiency, and a 2% growth in actual energy consumed per capita, which together account for the observed 2% annual growth in energy use per capita. The curve is also linked to the broader concept of the singularity, a point where the rate of change becomes so rapid that the future becomes fundamentally unknowable. A vision Adams foresaw for the 21st century. Now, generally speaking, the broader concept of the singularity is not related to energy growth, it's related to information processing. So, like, computers are going to get smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter, and then eventually they'll reach a point where computers are smart enough that they can write better code than the people that are coding them, and therefore they are able to increase, their own intelligence so quickly that it becomes, infinite, essentially. And the rate of growth is so insanely powerful and quick that everything before that is like negligible. And the point after which is just completely unpredictable. It's very interesting. However, let's see. The curve's most notable feature is its deviation from the historical trend. While energy consumption per capita in the United States and other developed nations showed steady exponential growth of about 2% per year up until the 1970s, this growth flatlined after that period, which is what this is showing. This little, stagflation, whatever we're going to call it here. This stagnation is attributed to a combination of factors, including the 1970s energy crisis, the OPEC oil embargo, and the implementation of Nixon's energy price controls in 1971, which disrupted market dynamics. More broadly, it has been linked to an anti-Promethean backlash against technological progress, increased regulation, and a perceived societal shift away from the ambitious, forward-looking optimism that characterized the 19th and early 20th centuries. The failure to realize many futuristic technologies like flying cars is often cited as a symptom of this stagnation. That's very interesting. So this is like not something I haven't seen this before, but so this is not like a new novel thing that they're looking for. This is basically something that people have noticed before. They're saying it was all because of, specific things that happened in the 1970s. We've got the energy crisis, OPEC oil embargo, and Nixon's price controls. Now that would be fine, and you would go, all right, that would explain, that would account for this big giant dip. But that big giant dip would essentially, if this trend was real, these other things had dips. You got dips here, but then it rises. You got dips, then it rises, dips, rises, and you've got a general trend that tracks along this curve. The fact that it then levels off, therefore, would not really be accountable by these specific things, by the, energy crisis, OPEC oil embargo, price controls. No, it wouldn't do that. The market adapts, which is what happens, at all these other big dips and peaks and valleys and blah, 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 blah. The market adapts, changes, adapts. So the reason that this happened, it has to be something either that is ongoing, something that, happened, that was a big deal, that was then ongoing. And obviously, we know the title of this video. They're going to say, it was women. It was women doing it. Or it has to be some kind of like other factor that would be like, we've tapped all the oil. We've, found the best way to make energy, blah, 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 blah. We can't go any further than this. There's physical laws limiting this growth. We've hit the actual ceiling, which would be possible, but obviously that's not the case. We've got better sources of energy. We've got nuclear energy. We've got, natural gas, which is better than coal, which is better than this kind of, better than all these things in the 1970s. We've got more of it. We can get it cheaper. We can get it easier. We can get it faster. And, obviously the population is growing too. So there has to be some other reason for this flattening of the curve.
See here is around the 1960s, it stopped, and if anything, started declining, while before perfectly fitting to the curve. Then, if we go down to this next study here, we can look at total pages published in the Federal Register, thousands of pages per year. We can also see a logarithmic curve going up until we hit.
All right, words per million related to themes of progress in blue versus caution in red in English, French, and German books. So caution, worry, and risk is pretty flat. It's pretty flat, normal, until it reaches, it goes up a little bit here, and then we get an actual trend going up, which matches this trend up here in progress and future going down at, we would say, roughly in 1970. So this plus this other chart, which is, this plus this chart is basically saying, hey, all right, there had to have been something else going on. This represents a cultural shift, probably, as opposed to a, like energy market economic change. There's something happening here culturally that's making this change happen.
Around 1975, and then it basically stops. Okay. Now, to go into the piece where it starts getting interesting. We live in an age that has lost its optimism. Polls show that people think the world is getting worse, not better. Children fear dying from environmental catastrophe.
Do we think that? Do we think the world is getting worse, not better? Certainly, that is the vibe I get, is that most people think the world is getting worse as opposed to better. It's very odd that you hear somebody say that, you know what, this is the best time ever to live, to exist. Usually, maybe they'll limit it to like, this is the best time to exist in the West. Maybe this is the best time to exist in the world. But it's very odd that you get a Steven Pinker character who's like, no, like we're on a positive trend. Everything's getting better. Okay? It might not, like, even he will basically say, well, it might not be getting better everywhere at the same rate at the same time. Sometimes things are getting worse. Sometimes, things are getting worse, in certain specific places for a certain amount of time. But overall, in general, on average, for everybody in the world, things are getting better. Historical trends are positive. But generally speaking, you don't hear that. You generally don't hear that. And even he's kind of like gotten a little bit more pessimistic in recent times. The last couple interviews that I've seen with him, he's a little bit more pessimistic about the way the world is. Depends on how you live in the world. Yeah.
Before they reach old age, technologists are as likely to be told that they are ruining society as they are bettering it. And then he is right. This change is quantifiable. Books written in English, French, and German, the three major languages of the modern West, showed a continuous rise in the number of terms relating to progress and the future from around 1600 to 1970, when things suddenly took a turn for the worse.
That is crazy. Because that's such a huge. Okay, words per million. Okay, so it is an average, like per capita, related to those themes. That's a huge jump. Like, that's like, what is it? Triples, quadruples the amount of words related to that with the 1700s. Like, you see that stuff and it just, boom, it just explodes. That's crazy. I mean, that's a real legitimate, like, quantifiable cultural shift.
On screen a graph here, and what you can see here is going into
I don't speak German either.
Basically, until you get to around the 1970s.
I don't speak French either.
Two things happen in the English language. People stop using terms that stand for progress or the future, like moving forwards, and they start using more words that are associated with caution, worry, and risk. So society basically became worried about the future getting better. And if you go, and we talked about this in our episode, Nationalism Saves Countries, and it's not just nationalism, it's retro-futuristic nationalism, where if you go to the 1950s sci-fi, it's just very forward-looking, very excited about the future.
This is so true.
Rocket ships and exploration and utopia.
And it's super cool, especially like if you look at like, let me think. Let's look at the Columbia exhibition. Yeah, like the World's Fair in Chicago. Like, just look at this. Like, look at that. Look at how cool that looks. Look at how awesome that is. Like, it's just cool looking, dude. Your dad knows how to speak Spanish. I can speak a little bit of Spanish. Not well, though. But it's like, you just look at this stuff from back in the day, and it's like, that was such a cool thing. They have so much, like, just absolutely awesome stuff. And then, this was like the 1800s. But again, like, it was just such an enormous, like, explosion in architecture, the American industrial optimism. I mean, it was just like this insanely cool thing that just, I don't know, like, it really like, it touches something. It makes a big difference that the culture is kind of like pointed in that direction. And you don't, I don't see any of that. I've never seen anything like that.
European colonies, when that stuff is incredibly rare in modern sci-fi. You see very, very little utopian-ish sci-fi anymore. And even sci-fi that used to have, I think...
You can't roll your R's, so you gave up? There are definitely some people that can't do that. You know what? I've always wondered this. Are there people in Spain and, like, Spanish and other Latin language, these things, that can't roll their R's? Because, like, in one thing, there is definitely, like my dad, he can't roll his tongue. Like, he can't curl it like that. He can't do it straight up. Like, he can't do it. But that's, like, you know, like, like the muscles or the tension or the something there. Like, there's something biologically different. Because some people can't do it. Some people can. I wonder if there are people in, like, Spain or France or something like that that can't roll their R's. Like, their tongue is not capable of making those movements. Or if it's just like a learned skill. I have no idea. Because you figure that would be a huge debuff, right? That'd be a massive, like, you can't speak the language that you're born into.
Star Trek's a bit of a dystopia, but it's at least written as a utopia. Watch our Star Trek episode, one of my favorites. But the utopian nature has left modern Star Trek, where it's written much more dystopianly now. If you look at something like, you know, Lower Decks, or you look at the new, like, Picard show and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's so true. God, like, yeah, like, all of the sci-fi, all modern sci-fi, that is absolutely insanely true. It's like, if it's not a straight up dystopian future, it's at the very least, like, nothing changes. Like, okay, like, the world is exactly the same now as it is then. The only difference is, like, the technology. Like, we're still fighting the exact same battles. Like, racism still exists. All kinds of inequality still exists. War, human nature is exactly the same. It's just that we're doing it in space now. We have rocket ships and, like, laser guns. But otherwise, everything's exactly the same. There's no difference. There's no change. So it's like, yeah, it's ridiculous. And it's just like, it does seem, I don't know, like, it seems realistic. And that's the problem, is that it feels realistic. Whereas, like, you're looking at something like a next generation Star Trek, and you're like, oh, that's so naive. It's like, no, dude, that's just as realistic. You know, it's entirely probable that in the future, if you were to have these kind of material circumstances, humanity would literally change. Like, as in a real legitimate generational sense, you would look at things differently. You would not have the same conflicts. You would not have the same issues and problems that we do today. The problems and issues that we have today are a result of, you know, material circumstances that are not necessarily true in a sci-fi world. I know a little of Spanish from Dora, childhood show. Nice.
And the larger piece, just so you know, that he sort of views feminism as an antagonist to what he refers to as progress studies, or like research into progress. Now, I actually think this framing is stupid when what he's actually talking about is human progress more broadly. But if you're wondering what progress studies is, that's like what Tyler Cohen, like Mercantor does, that sort of stuff, right? Or I guess Aporia more broadly does that, which is where this piece was written. One of the biggest
well,
drivers...
Works in Progress too, right? Based out of the UK.
Yeah. Okay, so then back to his piece. One of the biggest drivers of progress is rationality. Progress depends on the belief that the world is rational to begin with and can be understood and therefore intentionally changed for the better. I would agree with that.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. There's definitely an argument to be had for like, and I know a lot of like religious people would make the same argument, which is basically that pure rationality is not a necessity for progress, because you can have things that are like based on faith. It's just that you essentially say the world to a degree, like there's still an element of things that you can't make sense out of, but the majority of the world can be made sense of, and it's supposed to be. Like you're supposed to make sense of it. That's why God gave you reasoning capacity. It's to, explore the world as God, put it there for you and for you to explore. Like this is why you have the almost duty to rationalize the world because that's what God imbued you with. Yeah. Eventually got tired of Dora and stopped watching it because it's annoying me. Okay.
Howes, the historian behind the Age of Invention, calls this the quote-unquote improver's mentality and observes that it is historically rare, only arising in a handful of cultures. This is not an intuitive belief, ! Muslim scholar Al-Ghazali famously argued that as everything occurs the way Allah wills it, rather than according to predictable laws, science was impossible. The idea of progress, that sustained improvement is both possible and desirable, is a fleeting one. And here I'll note here, we've talked about when Islam began to fail and became sort of a religion of the Dark Ages, because there was a period when it was one of the greatest religions of progress out there. So much.
Very true. I mean, this is where all the, like initial like mathematics and stuff, it's just like, it's all Arab Muslim scholars who are doing like all of that new stuff, new works. Like I want to say like calculus and stuff. All of that stuff was all Muslim scholars and these types of things. But then, yeah, around what? I guess you figured like the era of the Crusades, roughly, maybe a little bit later than that. It just stagnates. It doesn't get any further. And you see that even in like their art. Like it's a really stark example of like the difference between what happens in medieval European art in terms of like the human form and these things and Muslim art. There's a huge disparity. The European art gets so much more like true to reality, and it cares so much about like figures and weight and like perspective and the way light works and all of these different like mathematical principles that you see in art and portraiture and all these types of things, whereas the Muslims doesn't move at all. It's like exactly the same. Like 500 years later, it looks exactly the same as like the 1000 AD stuff, whereas the European art is night and day. It's like unrecognizably different. It's crazy.
So that when Western writers would write scientific works, they would often write under Arab pen names because people wouldn't take them seriously. So that is how far ahead of us they were in the sciences, right? And Al-Ghazali comes along and basically everything begins to fall apart. He's like, we need to become mystical. We need to stop this progress stuff, basically.
Oh no.
Right. Yeah. Not great. And I don't think it's great for a lot of modern Jewish stuff, because we are seeing this in modern Jewish religious traditions with the Chabad movement, for example, moving them more towards mysticism and normalizing mysticism, which I see as sort of a Jewish version of Al-Ghazali's Sufi mystics. Even more importantly, reason allows people.
And this is also, I'll just mention it. They might mention it themselves, but this does kind of help give the appearance that you can have a cultural shift and it will have a legitimate impact on your scientific technological progress. Is that if you have a cultural shift that moves you away from the ideas of like rationality or the idea of progress, the idea of certain things that feed into technological innovation, well then the technological innovation is it's just going to collapse, because the counter argument to this would be, well, there's always going to be curious people out there. There's always going to be tinkerers that are, out in their garage that just are doing this because they like doing it, and they'll make new stuff, and that'll always happen. Well, this is, basically the historical trend here would show no, like it has to be a part of your culture. If you want to make sustained technological progress, you have to have a culture that values it and has the building blocks to make it happen.
People to stand on the shoulders of giants. And I'll note here what mysticism, the reason why mysticism doesn't allow that is because mysticism says that the subjective experiences you have, whether it's from corrupted mental states like drugs or spinning or just your own intuition, take precedence over subjective rationality that can be tested in sort of the court of the real world, right?
Yeah.
Which means you can't stand on giant shoulders anymore, because now you're just speculating on somebody else's speculation, which never had anybody really confirm its authenticity except for whoever was a popular idea person at the time. Scientific and technological progress are driven by exceptional individuals, but reason makes it possible to reliably build on the past or to debunk them when they're wrong, which allows the collective brain to improve over time rather than running in circles. With that in mind, the English corpus shows a steady rise in reason-related words, a corresponding fall in intuition-related words from 1850 to 1975. And here he shows a chart where you can see principal component words, sentiment, intention-related words, and rationality-related.
Okay, let me see. All right. Principal components, sentiment, intuition, rationally mixed words. Okay.
Words in 4 major language groups here. You've got English all, you've got Spanish, you've got English fiction, and you've got English Excel fiction. I don't know what that stands for, but you can see this is a very strong, that's just going down, 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 hits the 1950s, shoot right up to right now. We are at a lower use of many of these words. Like, let's say if you're looking at like how high intuition related words are used today, they are finally today used more or around as much as they were in the 1850s.
Oh dear.
In English, and in Spanish they're used more. In English fiction they're used more.
Yikes.
Right? That is horrifying. If you look at sentiment, like sentimentality related words, you have it go down, 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 down till the cold rationalist Victorians now shooting right up to like double the rate they were ever used in the 1850s.
Oof.
So this is definitely a real thing that he's noted here. And he said you can see the same trend in Congress. He shows here EMI ratings for Democrats and Republicans. Yeah. And you can see they were holding steady.
Let's check what EMI ratings are. I think it's related to like emotional intelligence, these types of things. No, it's not that. Let's try social. Nope. EMI health. Yes, it's all electromagnetic stuff. EMI. I'm thinking it's like, I was thinking it was like emotional content, these types of things. I think that I'm guessing that's what it is.
Sorry, it was going up from 1880 to around the 1970s,
EMI.
and then it begins to crash. And now it's at way lower rates than it was in 1880s. So the big political sex difference progress. And this is really interesting because I didn't know this. And we're going to go into another piece here before I get into this, but I want to hear your thoughts so far. I sort of feel this
argument fleshed out. I mean,
society has sort of felt like scientifically we've been declining since the 1970s.
Well, and that sentiment and optics and emotion have taken the place of reason and facts and science. So I don't disagree with this. I want to see a more stronger argument for a connection between feminine influence.
Well, we haven't gotten to that yet, but I can argue for an alternate theory of what might be causing this.
Yeah.
Okay.
It could be the establishment of the institutional academic bureaucracy.
Yes. So let me actually pop back here for just a second.
Feminine
Let me hit the record button because I kind of want to make a short out of this or something.
Well, we haven't gotten to that yet, but I can argue for an alternate theory of what might be causing this.
Yeah.
It could be the establishment of the institutional academic bureaucracy.
I can see that. However, I would also point to the fact that if you are looking at these things from, why does this stuff decline? It could be because you have a explosion of social sciences. You have an explosion of these sort of like soft sciences, and a lot of these academic, places of learning and scholarly pursuits, all of a sudden, they need more disciplines. They need more stuff. Before, you had a whole bunch of people that were very happy to make, they were basically just looking at things that are like, science, math, physics. I shouldn't say science, math, physics, geology, biology, very super, super hard science things. Then you basically introduce a whole new group of people, women, into the labor force. Some of them are going to want to be scholars, some of them are going to want to be academics. But the difference is that women are way less interested in things than they are in people. And therefore, what they want to study on average is going to be people. Now, the thing about people is it's very difficult to study them in the same way. It's almost impossible to study them in the same way that you can math or physics or these types of things with just pure, nothing but cold, hard rationality. You have to kind of have more of like, oh, well, science is like an art. It's not a science, it's an art. And therefore, these, intuition-based science practices become more, realistic. They become better poised to take over. And obviously, also, you can make a lot more of them. You could make a lot more disciplines that are just going into, smaller and smaller breakdowns of like, hey, we're going to have something that's like, we're going to study dance. Okay, cool. All right. Well, we want a new professor. I want to be a new professor here. It's like, okay, we already have a dance professor. Okay, well, I'm going to teach the theory of dance from African perspectives. Okay, yeah, cool. That's great. Okay, well, I also want to be like an African dance. We've already got an African dance theory teacher. Okay, well, how about like lesbian African dance theory? Okay, I guess we don't have one of those. Okay, yeah, all right. Well, there you go. And you just get this explosion of disciplines that are, studying things in a very sort of, almost pseudo-scientific fashion. And those are going to be the majority of papers published because there's only so many things you can study with a hard science without like, an enormous amount of funding behind it now and an enormous wealth of training and expertise to come about. So it's way easier to make papers about, lesbian African dance theory or, sexism in dog parks. You could make that stuff all day long. It's very easy to make those kinds of studies. It's very difficult to say, hey, I discovered a brand new particle in physics. That takes, millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars and, 50 years of crazy physics experience. And even then you might not be able to get it, because like you got to get lucky enough to find it. Yeah. My mic is cutting in and out. Ooh, that's not good. Is it still cutting in and out? I don't know.
Because that didn't really happen until the 1970s. And a lot of people don't realize when they're like, trust the science, that the system we use to determine what science is true and what isn't, like a peer-reviewed with like a score attached to it based on how many people have cited you, this system didn't really develop until the 1970s. Before that, science was something entirely different. And so when people say trust the science, they don't understand. They're saying trust an entirely new system that doesn't seem to work very well and that hasn't really been tested. But that in the way that we're seeing it tested in the court of public opinion is not doing well. If you look at the rate of scientific progress, to the rate of funding going into scientific progress, you see it's basically flatlined since the 1970s when you account for the amount of funding.
It seems so counterintuitive that a rise of academia would see a drop in facts and a rise in sentimentality, though. That's so odd.
No, well, so this is, I think, based on the stuff that I was talking about. It's like, the sentimentality studies goes up. There's more ways to study sentimentality, and sentimentality is kind of like an infinite well that you can draw on all day long, and you can cloak it in the sphere of science. You can cloak it in, hey, I'm a scientific researcher, I'm a professor, I'm making an article, and I'm going to peer review it. And sentimentality is, again, it's kind of an infinite well. So, of course, there's going to be more people who are getting into those studies than are going to get into physics, biology, these types of things. There's only, I don't want to say there's only so much to study, but it's like ostensibly there is probably a finite amount of hard scientific facts to discover. Now we're nowhere close to getting there, but eventually, we would eventually get there. And certainly right now you could easily say we've discovered all the facts we possibly can with the limitations imposed by our technology. Like, to find new particles, to find new physical interactions and these types of things, we need to develop new technology to be able to detect things. And then that detection will allow us to make new theories, and those new theories will necessitate new technology that we need to verify it. That's probably around where we're at right now. As opposed to, you know what, I've got a theory of feelings. You just write that stuff. The mic is currently cutting out. It doesn't look like it is on my end. Muted right then. So that was it. This is interesting. Cutting out. Let me see if I can see it. It might be the gating mechanism. I wonder if it's the gating stuff. Let me take a gander at you. Let me look at properties. I'm not going to look at properties. I'm going to look at filters. I don't have my compressor or any of this other stuff on. Let me see. Do I have... So it looks... from my perspective, I'm not dropping anything. I'm dropping very few frames, so it's not that. Could be that it is just not sending it. I'm trying to look at it from another monitor to see if I'm lagging at all. Doesn't look like I'm lagging. The mic's cutting out. My mic is on. Well, all right, yeah. Let me know if it's like just super continuous, or if it's kind of happening again and now again. Because right now I look okay, and I'm happy to fix it. But if there's nothing I can do to fix it, then we'll, I'll stop and we'll see what's going on. Okay. All right, so we'll continue. How about, can you hear? All right, I'm gonna hit play, and I'm gonna let it go for a while. I'm gonna hit play, and I'm gonna let it go for a while. And if they are cutting out, then it's the stream's fault. It's not my microphone's fault. All right.
Odd.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, he says here, I've been thinking about this progress in the sense of progress studies lately. As I'm wrapping up the fellowship and leading into the conference, a common lament is that the progress community is very masculine, both in the sense that women are underrepresented among enthusiasts of markets and technology, and perhaps also in the sense that there may be something inherently quote unquote masculine in the gung-ho, relentless, aggressive vibe of progress as a concept in itself. And this was by Sarah Constantine who said this. So a woman said this. A woman said that progress is masculine. But what I found really compelling, and I didn't know this, is despite the widening gap in political identification, which we all know about, sex differences on specific political issues are typically small. But there is, and I'm going to put a graph on screen here because I didn't know this. And what this graph shows is just all of the various, abolition private health insurance against limited government mag.
All right, this is views on social issues, the economy, and immigration. This is 2019 to 2021, and as we all know from all the charts, women are getting more liberal, men are getting more conservative. So this difference is going to be even more stark nowadays in 2025. And there is, as you can see, all of these things, there is a big difference, and it's very super consistent. It's super, super consistent between these things where it's like, yep, like this is the thing. Yeah. Views on national issues. Yeah, and it's like, again, it's basically across age brackets. If you thought it was like a cultural issue where like older people, because older people tend to be more conservative than younger people. So it's not really that. It is a legitimate, sex difference. Which obviously, I mean, it certainly makes sense to me. And I think to most people, it seems to be common sense that they can just go about their normal day-to-day life and say, yeah, women tend to think differently than men. I know, obviously, that's a weird, crazy, insane concept in current year, but it seems like obvious common sense and, obviously the case throughout the entirety of human history.
Magazines, like just tons and tons and tons of different positions here. And what you'll notice is that the male and female position is really not that far apart on most issues. But then he notes here was one enormous area where that is true: support for technological progress, economic dynamism, and human abundance. This is
where is that? Human abundance. Let's see where this is. Trade, Medicare, abortion. I'm not seeing. Maybe I'm not seeing it. Invest in technology to protect the environment. I don't see any huge differences here. So I'm looking for like, there's got to be one that's like a huge difference. Grant reparations, provide, raise taxes. No, I don't see it.
The one area where women actually have a massive difference in terms of their preferences.
Why?
I don't see it.
Well, you actually see that. Okay, think about it this way. If you go around and you ask people, should nuclear reactors be shut down? Like, are nuclear reactors a danger? Women are going to be hugely disproportionately more likely to say they should be shut down. And you actually see this in the studies. We'll get to this in a bit. Or
That's
you
true.
ask about GMO foods. Women are wildly more likely to say GMO foods should be shut down. I would bet AI technology, and this is why the conservatives have weirdly become the pro-AI party and the progressives the anti-AI party, because the progressives are, and I note to our followers here, what this means is if you're the type of conservative who goes out there and is like, hey, we need to like shut down research, we need to not, continue with all this scientific development, you fundamentally have a feminized mind. You're thinking like a woman. The conservative who comes out there and is like, well, we just need to stop all of this moving forwards. We need to go back to the way things were. You are thinking like a woman.
There we go.
Hilarious.
There we go.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Actually, now I'm going to skip and go to the piece that he linked to where this graph came from that showed that women and men actually aren't that different in their political beliefs, because I thought it had some interesting ideas in it.
Okay.
So it says, and I'm going to put an image on screen here, if the Longhouse values feelings of warmth and safety above all else. The Longhouse is like this female cabal sort of idea. It's the male version of the patriarchy that some men come up with and don't want to admit that they're just blaming everything on the matriarchy. Reveling into learned helplessness, which the Longhouse does do, I would argue, like the whiter female vibe. The Goon Cave lacks decorum, is unnecessarily cruel, and generally repulses most respectable people. And he has an image representing the two, and I'm like, yeah, that checks out for me. For example, your symbol of progress in the second half of the 20th century was space exploration. For as far back as there is data, men have been much more likely to support increasing government funding for space exploration, usually around twice as much. I'm going to put a graph on screen here which shows this. And there's an increasing divide, with women now more and more against space exploration.
Well, then women can't complain about not being astronauts at the same level. You gotta pitch in.
There's women astronauts. There's those women who paid men to make them astronauts.
Yeah.
To be adored.
Oh, that's rough.
Perhaps the single biggest political issue taken up by those under the banner of progress studies is housing. Political barriers to local construction, NIMBYism, especially in highly desirable metropolitan areas, are blamed for low supply and thus extremely high housing prices, which are in turn blamed for slow growth, climate change, poor health, financial instability, economic instability, and falling fertility. In Britain, which was one of the worst housing crises in the developed world, men support building more houses in their local area by 17 points, while women oppose it by 3 points.
Ooh, that's a big swing.
That's a divide. Wow. Okay.
What are your thoughts so far before we go further here?
I don't understand women. This is.
If I say non-autistic women, know your limits.
See how the men look at her with utter contempt. Women, know your limits.
We need to, the greater replacement, the autists need to replace everyone else. We're
working on it, man.
We need to get out there and get pregnant and make it your new special interest, okay?
Hilarious.
Because I don't want my kids out there dating some normie woman, all right? That's going to be very dangerous. They're going to have to deal with emotions and sentimentality and anti-progress.
Very difficult.
We need to wash this out of the gene pool, whatever is in women to feel this way.
Probably a little bit of an overreaction.
Which combines significant greenhouse gas emissions, which is great, very good at removing air pollution, with the reliability of fossil fuels, also true, it's very reliable, is another technology the progress movement strongly backs as a supplement to solar. There is a 30-point sex gap in the support of increasing nuclear power generation in the U.S. And being male is one of the strongest predictors of...
I did not know it was that. I mean, like, I want to see the relative breakdown across like party lines, like liberal, conservative. But yeah, I mean, a 30-point divide between the sexes. That's huge.
Support of nuclear in Denmark. And I'm putting a graph on screen here that shows this.
Okay. Do you support or oppose increasing the use of nuclear power to generate electricity in the United States? Don't know, no opinion. Oppose, support. I mean, that's a big difference. That's a huge difference. God, that's big. That is crazy. Yeah, all right. You know what? We got to take away the vote. You lost it. You lost the privileges. We thought it was a good idea. Clearly, it's not.
As you would expect from their technophilia, Progress Studies is broadly in favor of transgenic crops, GMOs, such as golden rice or Roundup-resistant corn, giving their potential to contribute to rapid 20th century progress in agriculture. GMOs don't get as much attention as they used to, but women are 16 points more likely to believe that they are worse for health than men. And I have another graph on screen here showing this.
Okay.
What do you think?
I wonder, like, maybe it's not that these are inherent female views or intuitions, but rather that a pervasive culture that has permeated female spaces argues these things. And if, for example, we just replaced, like, if we bait and switched the cultures out, they would just...
That was...
For some things, I could see that. For, like, a GMO, I can totally see that. Like, women are getting bombarded with more messaging on, like, GMOs, food purity, these types of things. I could see that for that. And therefore, for some issues, sure. I don't think women are getting a lot more nuclear energy bad pitches than men. I could be wrong, but my guess is that's probably not the case. And that is something that, you know, again, like law of large numbers, you're going to have people who, you know, like the majority of people, when polled about nuclear energy, don't really know anything about nuclear energy. They don't know about power plants. They don't know about, you know, the safety of it. They don't know about the environmental impact of it. They have no idea about any of it, just because most people don't know, you know, a lot about any subject in general. They've got a certain specialization that they do. They're like, hey, what do you do for a living? this guy's a carpenter, she's a plumber, whatever. That's what they know. That's the majority of the things that they have expertise in. That's the majority of the thing that they spend their time on. And therefore, everything else is, second tier, third tier, don't know anything about, just because they don't have time. That's the majority of people. So when you get people like, when you get a large poll of people, the majority of people who are, if they're asked about nuclear energy, don't know anything about it. So what are you going on? You're going on your intuition. You're going on just like your instincts, your feelings about a thing. And if there's a big difference, that is, that's if there's a large sex difference between men and women on that, then it means that, there is an intuition around safetyism that's more prevalent in women than there is in men. Like that's the nature of these polls. That's why they exist.
My hypothesis, but what he's going to go into later in this piece is that the sentiment against technology is one of the few gender gap things that hasn't changed in men and women over time.
It's just kind of universal.
For example, women used to be like more anti-abortion than men. They used to be more religious than men. They used to be more conservative in a lot of areas than men, but they were always anti-progress. And so that
who wrote Frankenstein but a woman?
Yeah,
that's.
So the men who are anti-progress today, who are not progressives, but I mean like
just being feminine, yes,
human flourishing, right?
The technophobic men are just living into the longhouse.
Whatever you are to a woman, they are to a man.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
At least in their brain and made them like an 1800s woman. They're more conservative and more against abortion, but also terrified of technology. Now, of course, they wouldn't say I'm terrified of technology. They'd just be like, well, technology, GMOs, editing human genomes, etc. That's all dangerous and scary and new. And it's like, well, be a man, like barrel through. Like that's what we always do, right?
Right.
You get the Victorian.
Yeah, man, use tool fix thing. Hello.
I have cancer. Baby have cancer. Fix cancer. Fix gene.
Fix cancer. Yes.
Baby not smart.
Use tool. Fix thing.
Baby frail. Anyway, progress studies is pro-natalist. I love he throws that in there. Get the pro-natalist thing.
Right. Thank you, Arcotherium.
On the grounds that the purpose of progress is to benefit people, there need to be people to benefit, and that more people means more agglomeration effects, more economies of scale, longer learning curves, more opportunities for specialization, more competition, and more potential innovators.
Interesting. Okay, so the one that I'm interested in here is like too many children are being born. Women, 26%. Men, 19%. Men, not enough children being born, 30%. Only 14% of women. So I mean, like that's a big difference here. That's a large swing in averages there. Yikes.
Once again, women are more likely to believe too many children are being born than men, 26 to 19 in terms of points difference, and are less likely to believe not enough children are being born, 14 to 30. So again, this is something that we see here, right? Like we listen to the prenatal space. Women are just much more resistant to wanting to save humanity. They sort of want like this to be the final generation, society to ground to a halt. And of course, I'm putting a graph on screen here so you can see this.
Yeah.
And this is where he notes, unlike sex differences on issues like abortion or religious attendance, these gaps go back as far as can be measured. Relevant sex differences in personality. This is a different piece here. All that is solid melts into air. All that is holy is profaned. Technological and scientific progress is intrinsically dangerous, frightening, and destabilizing. It also has a potential cornucopia of riches, should the risk or reward dominate. The greater reproductive variance of men means that men are more likely to accept a high risk, high reward course of action. One way of looking at this,
that's fair.
The most reproductively successful man of the second millennium was Genghis Khan. The most reproductively successful woman was his mother. Naively, we would expect men to be more willing to risk failure for an uncertain future payoff, and this is exactly what we see. So basically he's saying women are risk averse and the female mind is risk averse, which is why they are progress in technology averse. Thoughts before I go further?
That's fair. I mean, I mean, we can definitely say that, just looking at the evolutionary psychology of that's true. That is accurate. And it makes sense. Again, like just evolutionary psychology reasoning there, it totally makes sense. women have a lot more to lose, and the human species has a lot more to lose if women take more risks, because, you know, those are the people that are making more people. Okay. You can have, if you've got a large amount of women and very few men, you can repopulate. It is not the case if that's the other way around. And therefore, you know, you evolved for that to be the case. You evolved for that to be, you know, reflected in your general intuitions.
Okay, that's, yeah, I mean, millions of years of evolution based on the limits of your biology and the risks to which you were subject.
So, per John Archer's 2019 meta-analysis of human psychological sex differences, some of the relevant personality differences for progress orientation, so this is a view of like wanting future to be better, agreeableness 0.29, engineering interest 1.11, mechanical reasoning, I'm not going to give you the numbers because you don't care, risk-taking, and harm avoidance. But there's a reason to believe that personality differences are even bigger because personality is typically assessed via questionnaire. This brings with it the obvious problems, such as people responding with different reference groups in mind, as well as social desirability bias, which can deflate results. For example, when assessed via questionnaire, the fearfulness gap between men and women is D0.41, which is noticeable but not huge. But when assessed in the real world, the gap is much larger, 1.16 to 0.49. The self-assessed difference in risk-taking might not seem that large, but consider that the blank slatists argue that young women's social anxiety over cooking a bad meal is equivalent in risk-taking to young men jumping off of cliffs for fun. The reference frame for what constitutes a risk is not the same for men and women. That is why if you're looking for people who are both interested and able in engineering, disagreeable enough to break consensus, and willing to take risks for uncertain payoffs, you will overwhelmingly find men. As a result, technology / market / future and ideas-oriented groups tend to be around 90% male. And here, I'm going to put some graphs on screen here. And the first poll is points allocated to 5 academic priorities by gender among undergraduate and graduate PhD students. And here you can see that women are less interested in academic freedom.
So this is just points allocated to 5 academic priorities by gender among faculty. I guess it's like how important they are. Okay, so you've got academic freedom, advancing knowledge, academic rigor, social justice, and emotional well-being. Okay.
They are less interested in advancing knowledge. They are less interested in academic rigor. They are more interested in social justice, and they are more interested in emotional well-being. Here you can see points allocated to all 5 academic priorities by gender among faculty. Women are less interested in academic freedom. They are less interested in advancing knowledge. They are less interested in academic rigor. They are more interested in social justice, and they are more interested in emotional well-being. Now comes the correlatory part here. You getting concerned, Simone? I
mean, there's a time and a place for those things, right? Like, it's good to balance, but
absolutely. And I mean, this is certainly the case. I mean, like, look, there is a reason this difference exists in human beings. It's because it is useful. It is useful to have these differences. It's useful to have, you know, a mediating force, a moderating force that says, no, don't go out there. Don't be, you know, going over the next hill. Don't be doing that. You know, you need to stay here. It's safer. It's stable. You want that, right? You also want a piece of, you know, a portion of the population to go, no, that's what I want to do, and I'm going to do it. You need both. You need both because they're useful in different scenarios. They're both good in the sense that, you know, they each thrive and succeed and are presenting the correct strategy in different scenarios. And if you only have one, you're eventually going to meet a scenario which is bad for that group. So like, hey, we want to just take risks. They want to take risks all the time. Eventually, you're going to meet a problem that the risk is really bad. You're going to take the risk and you're all going to die. Exactly the same scenario in the other way, where it's like, I want to be stable. I'm going to be totally stable. I'm not going to change anything ever. Eventually, you're going to meet with a scenario where the only way to get through it is to change and do something different. If you keep doing the exact same thing, that's it. You're done. You're toast. So you need both of them. You need them both. All right, Minty's back.
I don't know, man. Now's not the time.
And I note here, this isn't for the women who watch our show. You're basically a different gender because you're all a bunch of little autistas. You're artisanal women, which is very different from the category of creature I am talking about. You have met these creatures. They are terrifying. I was talking with Simone recently, like her inability to understand like normie women. And I'm just like, I'm so glad you don't get it because.
Well, also like, I'm getting the impression that most of my high school friends were probably on the spectrum.
Well, you had a lot of.
We're just culturally very different. Yeah, like Asian first generation. It may just be a cultural thing. Like I can't model this because I didn't encounter it. It's so hard for me to understand this. But that's why I feel like the cultural argument remains. I don't know. I can't.
And again, I mean, like you could certainly make that cultural argument, and you can say, you know, it is shifting viewpoints, but again, it's like the average. Like this is why it works. It's because cross culturally, this is the case. It is. You switch to your phone now. Okay, yeah, but basically, like there's a difference between this stuff. It can be kind of like shrunk. The difference can be shrunk a little bit. It can be enlarged in other places because of culture. But cross-culturally, this thing is still going to exist. There's going to be this, you know, sex difference cross-culturally. That's how evolutionary psychology works. That's how you're modeling these things. It's how you're looking at these things, and it's how you're determining whether or not these are cultural issues or, you know, biological issues, evolutionary psychology issues. And I mean, the science is settled on that. You know, like it's just statistically the case that these differences exist.
Model, I can't imagine my friends from high school, for example, my first generation Asian immigrant friends being like, oh, GMO foods, that's scary. Like they wouldn't do that. You know, they wouldn't be afraid of AI. They adopt it fast, right? Like they were the ones who told me how to use new tech. So
yeah,
is this cultural? Maybe. I mean, I don't know.
My new joke about Asians, by the way, is that our great grandchildren are going to see Asians the way people in the anime Frieren see elves, where it's like the elves in Frieren. If you don't know, they are like don't get strong arousal, and they're not really interested in relationships or romance, so they just breed at incredibly low rates. And if you look at our video on is low Asian fertility genetic, which is really interesting. We go into the data on this. It may just be that they feel like arousal and romantic feelings at a much lower rate because of high rates of arranged marriages in their cultures. And so our kids will be like, oh my gosh, you cute little, have you ever,
that's interesting.
Did you really not feel arousal at all? Are you not desired to go out and mate with people?
Oh my God.
That's interesting.
But anyway, female cultural dominance. If women are psychologically more predisposed to small c conservatism than men, and hence opposed to progress, we might expect female cultural dominance to lead to the pattern seen in the text corpuses above. Does the timing work? Yes. Since 1970, women have gone from present but marginal in prestige cultural institutions to approximate parity with men. First, women authored books crept upwards as a share of total books between 1800s and 1970s before rocketing upwards, and are now the majority. The publishing industry is itself 74% female, and here I'll put in graph on the screen female authored books where you can see it just explodes after the 1970s. Well, second, academia is intended to be the brain trust of society, an association of professionals paid to discover the truth. In 2022, women became the majority of college faculty in the United States. And you can see if you go back to the 1970s, they just were not present in very big numbers. Data doesn't exist for the key year of 1970s, but we can plot the ratio instead, and we get the following chart where you can see women just explode as a proportion starting around the 1970s. This closely matches the picture of college graduation rates. Note that the x-axis is the cohort birth year in the chart below. So here, this is college graduation rates, and you just see exploding female college graduation rates. But this actually—
And that gap is widening, apparently.
Usually.
Down eventually. It's
massively.
just getting worse.
Oh, no, it's getting worse. Yeah, now
way
you
worse.
see men start to go into college less and less now. So
And more trade school, I mean, which is great. I mean, they're ultimately, I think, more and more having a college degree is a liability. So people are better off just
Very
and
true.
You can look at number of women in Congress. You can see it was very low before the really 1980s, and then it just explodes. The same was the number of women in the House. So in politics, women started getting involved.
Huh. Yeah.
Oh
So
yeah.
sucks.
Okay. I was looking at it, the
This
chart
is
wrong.
all... He's painting a worrying picture. I feel like it's an incomplete picture, but I can't give a very strong argument as to why, aside from I think culture is playing a role, despite the fact that I will admit that there are evolutionary reasons why women need to be more conservative and have evolved to be gender dimorphically more conservative, right? Like that makes sense. And it would be crazy if women were like the gender known for risk taking.
Yeah.
Because
Well, this is really interesting about women. So when we talk about, small c conservatives, traditionalist conservatives having feminized minds, I think that this is really messing with some small c conservative males because they get very confused. When you actually look at what the two parties are attempting to do right now, the party that's like taking big risks and is really interested in long-term human flourishing is the Republican Party at the moment.
Yeah.
You look at Doge, you look at their
Accurate.
engagement with like science and everything like that, and they're just way more interested in that. And the Progressive Party is become the party, as we often say, of the urban monoculture. But because the urban monoculture is the dominant culture right now, if your core goal is society not changing, which is the core goal of the urban monoculture that currently has dominance, you are going to fight for small c conservative causes, right? You're going to fight for things not to change to maintain your existing power hierarchy. And so a lot of people who are small c conservatives often take positions which are fundamentally very left-leaning within the current political ecosystem without understanding that's what they're doing, because they think big C conservatism or like the right is a small c conservative movement, which is just not. It is an almost anti-traditionalist movement insofar as it will aggressively take ideas from various points in human history, but it's building something new with those ideas.
That's true.
Even the traditional religious organizations that are surviving and thriving are doing it through new cultural technologies. I mean, people think of Mormons as like C culture.
Well, it's also, I mean, yes, that's true, but it's also because of this idea of like, the traditional movements it's the new punk rock. Like the new counterculture is like traditional, like Catholicism or something like that, Like that's the way you rebel against the system, is you go hardcore into some super traditional, like religious aspect. You do to that kind of stuff. That's punk rock now.
Culturally conservative, but they're really not. Like the entire way that Mormons date here now these days with the singles ward, this was like invented in the 1970s. If you look at like Catholics, like the tradcast communities that are actually surviving are not actually structured the way Catholic communities were in like the 1950s. It is a new way of being Catholic that takes aesthetic inspiration from periods long before the 1950s in the way that they're structured. It's a fundamentally new thing that's built using fundamentally new technology. And this is why the small c conservative that's not just focused on, we need autonomy to run our own community and do our own thing, they'll end up, I was recently saying, if you actually look at our positions on one of our podcasts, and I don't mean this in any way as negative about him, but at what's this guy, Lotus Eaters, Sargon of Akkad, not his words or not his public reputation, but his actual positions outside of abortion, we are to the right of him slightly on most issues. And yet the public framing of him is that he's like this far right extremist when he's like a pro gay marriage atheist. Apparently he goes to church now, but one person was like, well, another area where he's to the right of you is he's for banning pornography. And I'm like, that is the most left-wing position you could conceive.
It's super left-wing. Yeah.
If within the modern political context, banning pornography is hand in hand with banning VPNs. It is expanding the reach of a government nanny state and allying yourself with fat feminists to increase their market value because you lack self-control and you want to help save people who do not have your belief system and lack self-control.
And people have also said that he's to the right of us on immigration. I don't know where he stands on it.
I mean, what is our broad immigration?
Our stance on immigration is very simple. You can have one thing: open borders and no social services, or social services and extremely closed borders. That is our stance on immigration.
They shouldn't get in the first generation any.
Then let me think. So then you know what? He's to the left then, because he's probably to the left because. Well, no, I think he's probably in the same. He's probably in the same vein, but he's basically like, you're going to have social services. Yeah, like, so theirs is basically, it's a twofold attack on it, where it's like, you can have one or the other. Carl Benjamin stuff is basically like, you're going to have in the UK social services. You're going to, and therefore you have to have closed borders, because he does not even entertain the idea that you could have open borders and no social services. So in that sense, I guess you'd say he's probably to the left. I think that's the way I would view it, because it's like he's basically saying there has to be, a degree of socialism. That'd be my guess.
Social services at all, and that immigration should be based on the contribution to the economy, which means that you should be looking at, like, how much is this person earning in their home country, how smart are they, etc., which is Donald Trump's position. This is what he laid out in what podcast was that? It's not the position that he's actually ended up taking as policy, because he's been pushed.
Well, on the All In podcast, he was in favor of giving visas to people with degrees, but then that everyone pointed out after that like, well, they did that in Canada and it really really backfired. So yeah, it makes sense why he didn't do that. But I mean, that is a very conditional stance on immigration.
The position was to the left of us, which is give admission to anyone who goes to a U.S. university, which I'm like, that could be too hacked.
Yeah. Well, and it has been hacked egregiously in Canada at the very least.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Where I'm like, let them pay maybe $10 million per citizenship, something like that, right? Like, at the very least, you're not going to get a drain on the economy if somebody's paying $10 million.
Well, but he did. He released that golden visa program, which I think is less than 10 million. Cost
I think he did.
of
Yeah.
Golden Visa USA. The EB5 Immigrant Investor Program. Only.
How much?
Only 1,050,000. That's nothing.
Okay.
So
I mean, that's roughly at parity with like a Malta or something like that, which I think is like $1 million.
The reason I was saying this is because as the Conservative Party has begun, the big C Conservative Party, the right, the new right, I guess is a better way to put it, has become less small C Conservative. A lot of people have sort of lost their home and gotten confused and ended up in their confusion attacking their own side. The reason why something like a porn ban is such a terrible idea, outside of the rise in child rapes that it causes, go to our episode where we discuss this. It's like really big in the data. In one country when they dropped it, I want to say it was Romania, the rate dropped of SA on children dropped by like around 50%. It was huge. And we've seen this everywhere that has been legalized. You see this in Hong Kong. Like, functionally, you are condemning children to this fate.
Let them eat porn, okay?
Yeah.
You are giving the government, which is really bad, you are giving the government the right to define what is porn / vulgar, the ability to make VPNs illegal, because you fundamentally need to make this illegal.
You have to,
porn illegal, and then they'll define your ideas as vulgar eventually. They'll define this is what we're seeing in the UK. Like, a lot of the negative stuff that we're seeing now in the UK uses porn restrictions as justification for implementing the restrictions on free speech. The moment you go, we want to restrict this, you have
protect the children, baby. Yep, protect the children. Now, why we're protecting the children from like nasty stuff, right? Yeah. It's like what? I was like, porn for sure, definitely. Okay, is that it? Well, I mean, like maybe if there's any kind of like criticism of the government, I mean, like maybe that's. I mean, that could be bad. That could really scar the psyche of kids. We need to protect them from that kind of stuff. Really? Yeah. Are you sure we can't talk? No. We just no, we can't talk about it.
Handed bureaucrats the ability to define vulgarity, which is why it's so dangerous to do. And you haven't even really helped our side. You're only helping people who don't agree with these parts of our beliefs.
And this doesn't mean like if you, from a religious.
I mean, yeah, nobody wants to see people doing that. So, hey, come on, yeah. Why would you want this?
Standpoint, don't believe in masturbation or porn consumption. Like, by all means, abstain, but don't legislate that on other people.
Yeah, I mean, on this topic, the thing I point out is, countries that have had porn illegal in them for like the past couple decades are countries like Korea. Countries where porn is not illegal, which has a terrible fertility rate for its income level, where it is legal, are countries like Israel, which has a great fertility rate, or the United States, which has a great fertility rate.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, the results, the proof is in the pudding, but also. Like, I think from a religious standpoint, you need to have people make the decision on their own and build the discipline on their own. You don't get the benefits from a cultural standpoint by forcing it on people and removing their ability to make that a willful choice to not engage in that activity. You have, like, you don't get the reps, you don't get the lift if these people aren't choosing of their own
like prohibition and all that kind of jazz. It's like, why are we talking about this?
Is if you go to Korea, right? How many Korean men, like what percentage of the population do you think actively believe that they shouldn't be consuming porn, and then would if it was legal, would make the choice to advocate? Very small. I'm gonna guess like 3 or 4%. You go to Israel and you say, like, do conservative Orthodox Jews, do they have bans against pornography within their culture? Absolutely, they do. Right? You go to
like in the U.S.
That's fair.
FAP is a big movement. Like, by all means. Like,
that's a fair. Yeah, that's a fair point. That is, I mean, this inherently, fundamentally does agree with me, which is like, look, I don't think OnlyFans should be illegal. I absolutely don't think OnlyFans should be illegal in any way, shape, or form. I think it's completely insane if, some government would try to come in and like outlaw it. Because you're not going to get rid of it. You're going to like, all right, we squashed OnlyFans, so like 5 other sites popped up and we did that. Okay, if you were to somehow completely eliminate it, it would be bad and it would be insane, and you probably wouldn't ever actually be able to do it. But here's the thing. As much as I am against it being illegal, I'm also totally against anybody doing it. I'm like, you should essentially, like, no, like nobody should do OnlyFans. It should be insane. I've heard OnlyFans. It's a really interesting pack. Really interesting. Really, it is. It's very interesting. But again, I'm like, I don't think anybody should do it. I don't think anybody should be doing it. However, I don't think it should be illegal. I just think, everybody, every woman that, is thinking about going on it should be like, no, I'm absolutely opposed to that. I would never do it. I think that's better.
Christian communities that have these great fertility rates, they have restrictions on pornography, right, within the U.S., because that's why we're higher fertility than a lot of the other countries. But that is in part maintained by the fact that we are forced to make these choices that affirm our identity regularly.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I was talking about this in regards to put together this memo for the Mormon Church on how they can attempt to increase their fertility rates. And anyone here who's like a Mormon and you're like, oh, I'd like to get that and give it to like my elders or whatever to consider. And one of the things I point out is, when you're putting on your garments that differ you every day, this is what people outside of the Mormon Church call the magic underwear. You are affirming that you are different from other people, and that different.
You're leaning in.
Are expected for you. You are othering yourself to yourself, and you're making the conscious choice to be different. When you remove that, if we made garments a legal mandate within a state, you have now lost all of the.
Why are we watching somebody talk about OnlyFans porn? Dude, hey, I don't know. Said something about you, right? Said something about you, not me. Okay, I'm doing this for education. I don't want to be doing this.
Benefit the garments provide. So I think that this
You mean should some state do that if a state were to do that,
right?
Yeah,
But I think that if a state were to do that, it would be drawn by a very feminine impulse. This impulse of, you know, what we need to the sort of pearl clutching, like we need to control people impulse, right? Like it's not my responsibility to do these things; it's the state responsibility. In the same way that it's, you know, a feminine impulse that drives things like welfare and stuff like this, right? Like people shouldn't be expected to learn to control themselves in regards to, you know, making an income, right? So it's the state's responsibility, right? I mean, it's a feminine impulse that drives, you know, when you see the small C conservative people do this, like we'll restrict drugs, right? Instead of expect people to learn. Now with drugs, there's externalities because it's actually addictive, and I think that it's worth talking about drug restrictions. But
I kind of can agree with some of that, because I mean there is, like like, because they are addictive and they are, you know, there might be some degree of like, you know, certain drugs should be perhaps illegal or something like that. I can see the argument for it, but I mean it's also like you're not necessarily going to get rid of it. So what would you rather have? Would you rather have, you know, them be illegal and there's no legal recourse for any kind of, you know, any of the issues that pop up in people that, you know, are addicted to drugs already? Or would you rather have it, you know, to some degree out in the open and therefore controllable? I do tend to lean towards the libertarian view on that, which is like, yeah, like between the two possibilities, it's probably better to just, you know, make them more legal. It's just, you know, controlled. And then of course, you know, like there's plenty of drugs that are like illegal that are just like, no, like it's stupid. It's stupid for these things to be illegal.
But I think that if you're doing this from if we just force people to act in the way that we want to, right, in a way that maintains the existing status quo, these impulses have been increasingly normalized because of the rise of women within our societies. And this has been fascinating for me, this cultural shift that we've seen with the new right and what sort of defines modern conservatism within sort of youth culture. Which is very interesting.
Yeah.
And I mean, we see this. If you look at like the broad youth culture you see today, like if you go back to the porn thing, I think it's an interesting place here. If you look at the major online battles, you know, whether it's TracerButt or Gamergate or like Skullgirls or Ebony, whatever, it's always the conservative faction that is anti-censorship, and the anti-conservative faction, mostly made up of feminists, that is pro more censorship. And and why shouldn't they be? I mean, so much of politics is actually about mate guarding and increasing their value in sexual marketplaces. That's what you really see happening here. Is a fight by many women to increase their value on sexual marketplaces, and where they can sort of Shanghai individual conservative players, they will.
Well,
but
just generally on this subject, one place where I feel kind of frustrated is, like, if this is all women's fault, I mean, really? Or did men fall asleep at the wheel and women take it? Right? Like...
Yeah.
But I will say that I think that the urban monoculture uniquely spreads fast within women. And so I think that what we're seeing here, I mean, if you listen to a lot of our talk, we say most of societal ills are downstream of the urban monoculture. And a lot of the ills that are coming from women having disproportionate positions of power and the expansion of the bureaucratic apparatuses that favor the female mind, because women are better at operating within large bureaucracies, has been that women are fundamentally more small c conservative, which means they're much more likely to kowtow to dominant cultural narratives around, okay, you can't do this because this is vulgar, or this is wrong, you can't say this, you can't talk about this. And so women have benefited hugely from, like, the urban monoculture. One, more works with the female mind, but also works to sort of transform the environment that it's in to make it more conducive with the female mind so that women can better outcompete men. It's like a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah.
Where it sort of terraforms the environment
Gotcha.
into being an environment where women have disproportionately more power.
Right.
Poisons it.
I understand that. And I mean, that you kind of figure that's true for most things, where it's like, hey, you know, the people that are in charge are going to make the thing that they're in charge of easier for them to be in charge of, you know, and they're going to make it more powerful. I mean, yeah, like, I mean, this is why governments grow. This is why governments get bigger. This is why politicians, you know, make more politics. They make bigger bureaucracy and these types of things. It's like, yeah, they want to make sure that they keep their jobs. And, you know, the way in which they keep their jobs is not by doing a good job. It's easier to change the system so that, you know, they're kind of like always going to have a job. Yeah. Nothing new, but
to those who are immune or less likely to be infected.
Yeah, like it like turns women into like this invasive species that like pump out this miasma that both kills off all the other species in the environment, but also, you know, converts other women into miasma producers.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because I do think that the one thing that I think is most absent from Arctotherium's discussion here is the role that culture plays and the fact that women are just more likely to spread culture and adhere to it. Because all this, like the GMO stuff, yeah, I don't know. I think that tech and progress.
Interesting. Okay, so more likely to spread culture and adopt it. That's very interesting. And then I guess you would say the male role is to kind of create culture. Interesting. So if you want to, yeah, so if you want to basically like, you know, start, if you want to spread a cultural movement, you have to get, yeah, it's like you want to get women involved in it, which makes, I mean, yeah, that makes sense, which is why you'd say like, hey, like leftist politics kind of usually wins out a lot. It's because, you know, you've got the women involved in it. Boy, got that Coca-Cola? Heck yeah, he does.
Framed in ways that
looks
that
like
would
zero
appeal
sugar to me.
Women's
could be wrong though.
Risk aversion and desire for safety and consistency. Tech can maintain stability in times. It can help.
No, tech is intrinsically disruptive because the point of technology is to change the way things work.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm a worker.
Yes and no. I mean, like as we run out of oil, nuclear is a really good resource to turn to if we don't want to have to fundamentally change the way that we live and do things.
Right, but if think about what nuclear actually means for the global economy.
Yeah.
If we did switch to a nuclear-run global economy, right? One of the largest industries today, the global oil industry, would collapse, right?
Yep.
Or
yeah, but 100%. Are women really wringing their hands about that? And it's about an aesthetic framing of nuclear as risky and dangerous, which isn't.
That is the framing. It's nuclear could explode. Nuclear is different. We're all going to get deformed if we use nuclear.
Right, but that didn't necessarily need to be the narrative. It just happened to be the narrative. If the narrative was instead that nuclear is the only safe way for us to keep, you know, our energy production stable as oil phases out, it could have been.
But you could easily think about it in the same way of like, okay, so instead of it being like a dangerous technology because the technology itself is like, you know, potentially going to create bad results, you can easily just say, okay, it's, you know, it's bad because it's disruptive. It's bad because it's going to put so many people out of business. How many people in America work in the oil industry? Or, you know, just the energy industry in general. Like, you know, how many people are coal miners? How many people are working on oil pipelines? How many people are doing fracking, natural gas? How many people are working on solar farms? How many people are working on wind farms? Blah, 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 down and down and down the line, right? It's an enormous section of the population. And certainly in like certain specific areas, like West Virginia, they always say West Virginia. It's just like a coal mining state. It's an enormous portion of the population where that is their job. If you were to basically say, hey, look, we're going nuclear, all of those people out of work. They're done. Job's gone. Now, a lot of them are going to be able to find new stuff, but that is going to be massively disruptive in the short term. It's the same thing with like truckers. If you were to have like a self-driving truck, you're putting millions of people out of business. And I think it's like Tucker Carlson like famously said, "Oh yeah, if they were ever to have like, you know, a self-driving truck, I would make it illegal immediately." Are you kidding me? Are you joking? I would make it illegal immediately because it would put people out of business. It's like, okay, in the terms, you know, in this framing, in these terms, it's a very feminine, you know, point of view. It's very small C conservative, you know, I just want everything to stay the same forever point of view. Which I mean, I agree. It's not that great. Zero sugar and soda is nasty. I tried. You know, I agree. It's not as good. It definitely has like a little chemical aftertaste. I don't like it as much, but I prefer Coke Zero to Diet Coke. 100%. I haven't had soda in like a million years, but if I had to pick, I'd go Coke Zero.
It could have been something that I think women would have found quite appealing. Nuclear's cleaner. Nuclear doesn't get people into yucky coal mines that are so dangerous, and it's in spark.
I mean, that stuff's out there though. That narrative is in existence, and those are the facts. Nuclear is cleaner, it's safer, it's more energy efficient, it's better in every possible sense. Okay? It just is better. Those facts are out there. They don't grasp on as hard as, you know, nuclear explosions, as, you know, you're deformed, as, you know, it's going to put your husband out of jobs. You know, hey, your husband's a coal miner. Nuclear comes around, he's done. He's out. He's toast. He's got to find something else. Learn to code before AI takes over that job.
Sparkly, clean factories and
you know, I also find it interesting when you talk about nuclear, and I was talking to you about this today, is how little Germany has accomplished recently, and just how effed Germany is, and how much France has, despite, you know, having many of the downsides Germany does. People know I have an anti-France bias. I'm very anti-French. As I said,
nice.
France would be a great place if it wasn't full of French people. But the problem is that France is technologically kind of killing it. Like, one of my favorite AI models is Mistral. And Mistral is built by a French company. You know, France has developed a lot of good video game studios. Germany is just like doing nothing in these sorts of spaces.
Okay, have they developed a lot of good video game studios? I feel like that's incidental. I feel like they've had some people that are good and they've left. Yeah, like Ubisoft. Come on, they didn't. Yeah, they succeeded in spite of the fact that they were French, and then once they got Frenchified, they got bad. They got terrible. I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming he's basically just mentioning Clair Obscura, which is like, yeah, okay, like that's French, but like, what do they have to do? He had to leave. He had to leave the studio to make a good game. So don't go too far here. All right, keep the anti-French.
And you can look at the difference in nuclear between the two countries, with Germany banning all of its nuclear reactors and decommissioning them, while France is one of the most nuclear countries in the world.
Yes, it is.
The number of nuclear reactors that they use. I think it's like the majority.
I don't think it's the amount of nuclear reactors, but it's in terms of like the percentage of their energy used. Massive. It's huge. It's like, it is the majority. I want to say it's like 70+%.
Majority of their grid. They basically solved the carbon problem in their country just by going with nuclear. And maybe it's because the French mind is more masculine than the German mind. And they're more open. And this could be a bottleneck effect. As I've mentioned, Germany and France were changed in big ways by who died during the two world wars. Like, what were the personality traits associated with death for each of the countries?
Good.
And they kind of were pussified by that in a way that
that's
America
very interesting.
was not. The soldiers ended up having a lot more kids than other people. I mean, if we want to talk about that, like, how many kids did soldiers have? Every single one of our male grandparents was at D-Day. And the commander at D-Day, which is interesting. It all was in a different. One was
mine wasn't. He was flying planes to drop people off behind enemy lines.
Oh, to drop off like the paratroopers.
Yeah,
yeah. I remember one of mine was a commander
Airborne.
of a boat, one of the boats, and the other one was a commander of an engineering group. All right. Anyway, great to chat with you and have a spectacular day, Simone. Did this change your opinion? I agree with you. I don't actually think it's because women. I think that I think that women likely played a role in this, but I think it's women's the greater female tendency to converge on what is the socially dominant view, combined with the growth of the urban monoculture that sort of worked symbiotically to create these awful times.
Yeah, I see this much more as feminization. And much less as women did this. I think if we were to actually look at it, men played as much of a
Sure, that's, I mean, you're kind of splitting hairs there. Like we're feminizing the world, and therefore I was like, yeah, that's different from, you know, like women did it. It's like, wow, you're really splitting hairs here. It's like, okay, women made the world more feminine, and it's like, okay, like, did women do that, or did it just happen? It just happened to be like, you know, it's like, yeah, okay. I mean, you're really splitting hairs.
role in all of these feminizing toxic shifts in policy and academia as women did. They are equally culpable. This isn't about women. I mean,
and also males are more feminine now than they were back then. They're more
100%.
Definitely.
Yeah, because I mean, you can see women in positions of power in the past who did extremely masculine things. I don't. I mean, and I'm not going to deny that there are averages that make women more conservative, but yeah, I think it's an interesting take. There are things about this that I agree with, but not entirely.
Yeah, but I actually think the feminization of
Wouldn't
the
be
male
surprised.
mind
No.
is a large part of this, and the normalization of that feminization, and men not realizing when they say things that are fundamentally feminine.
Yeah,
They think that this is a normal thing for a man to think. When you go back historically to sort of the explorer mindset, that's this very masculine mindset that gets demonized within males more and more.
Yeah, and the risky inventions and trying new tech and all that. Yeah. My favorite takeaway from this is you're pointing out just how feminine many of these male cultural commentators' reactions are when they're like, tech bad, genetic modification.
But the great thing is,
it is
we can
hilarious.
Really fix all this with genetic modification, and I know our family will. I mean, within a generation, once we can get the germline gene editing stuff up and operational, I would almost certainly recommend our kids that they edit their daughters' brains to be more masculine, because I think it's too risky to have so many female-brained people being a large part of your. Look, you're not a female-brained person, Simone.
Oh
you know
my
that.
God,
Yeah.
that's
Our
great.
followers know that.
Well, there are other ways you can do that even after someone's born. You don't have to genetically modify someone to.
It helps though.
Anyway, I love you very much.
Or we could just take out these specific dangerous things like fear of progress. Anyway, love you. Have a spectacular.
I don't know if you could do that. That is rough, dude.
Well, tomorrow we have our Basecamp monthly member.
Let's see. Is this? He keeps saying goodbye and like wrapping up, and we've got like 10 more minutes
I'm
left.
so excited for it.
So you were saying that they were like James Lindsay is a grifter or something in the comments?
Yeah, I honestly, like, if I had to look at Ask AI, like what he's all about, because I mean, you and I.
Okay, yeah, he is pounding those cokes.
Like, you're giving way too much airspace to James Lindsay. But specifically, when we talk about someone's writing, it's not because we consider them to be important. It's because we see that particular piece of writing or media is getting a lot of attention.
Yeah.
And it's setting the tone for something, for a concept.
That's
so we
fair.
don't care if it was written by Nick Fuentes or like some, Taylor Lorenz or whoever. Like, it doesn't matter. What matters is if a lot of people are talking about it, if it's in the zeitgeist, if it has influence, because
if it's news, it's news. If it's news, it's news. It doesn't really matter where it comes from, I mean, that's completely reasonable. I mean, like, people on the left talk nonstop about Trump, like nonstop. Literally, anytime I talk to my grandmother, she's like, "I counted the articles today. There were 13 articles in the newspaper about Donald Trump," and I'm like, "Yeah, they can't get enough of them. They can't." And it's like, it's a left leaning. As if I need to mention it, but it's like, yeah, it's a left leaning newspaper. Of course they're going to talk about him. So it's like, it's kind of ridiculous to be like, oh man, I don't like this guy. He's saying something that's getting an enormous amount of attention. We shouldn't talk about it because I don't like this guy. It's like, okay, you can say that and say, we don't like this guy. I don't like this guy. He doesn't seem like a good dude. But the thing that he's saying is getting an enormous amount of traction. It's news. It's blowing up. It's clearly like, either tapping into something important, he's saying something insightful, or, he's saying something that resonates with people. It's yeah, like it's part of, yeah, like it's part of the zeitgeist, as she said. I don't want to steal her words, but I keep not being able to think of another one.
That means that it's worth discussing. So
or
honestly,
sometimes if the ideas are interesting.
There are many people though whose work we talk about. We have no idea what they are. We have no idea what their other work is all about. People like assume that like if we talk about Jordan Peterson, that we're familiar with all the years of his work, right, instead of just like I've read one of his books and we've consumed.
And somebody's like, "Oh, you read X thing from Y person. That must mean that you're a racist because they said a racist thing this one time in a different work." And it's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, we are not. We don't sit around reading, but yeah. So I just didn't expect. I didn't know anything.
Okay, this is a wrap up, much more so in the vein of, if you're a fan of this. I don't watch this all the time, if I'm going to be totally honest. I've watched a couple of these things, so that's why it showed up in my feed, and I just thought the title was too good. Women may have broken Western civilization. I mean, it was too good. I couldn't pass it up. It was hilarious. All right, let's see. Yeah, so we've done more or less everything. There's a couple other things that we could get into, but it's going to take us past our time. So I think I will say good luck in all your endeavors. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I will be back tomorrow, whatever was 3 hours and 40 minutes ago for you. Yes. And tomorrow I'm going to attempt to play video games. I'm going to attempt to play Deus Ex. We've tried it like 4 times. So we will attempt once more to get into the actual game, because I keep playing mods and they're just like, they're not that good, or they're at the very least like they change stuff around, and they change stuff around in such a way that it's like, I get it, I get why you did this, but you've kind of like broken the game. Like they made the AI and they made detection in a certain specific way. They made the lighting a certain way such that, people could actually play it and they could do the things they wanted to do. They could have the different, approaches, and they were all viable. Like you could go around, you could run and gun, you could shoot people, or you could go stealthy. The mods unfortunately make it so that you can't really be stealthy anymore, because they make all the characters, all the AI like way more responsive, and they make them way more like randomized in these things. So you can't like predict where they're going to be and like take them out and then, keep going. So it's like, all right, I'm literally just going to go with the most bare bones. What mod can I use to make this game, playable in a modern system, look decent, but change nothing? And I think I finally found that one. I think I found it. So tomorrow, hopefully we will play Deus Ex and I'll actually be able to get into it. If not, I don't know what we'll do. I'm open to suggestions. So if you've got any suggestions, leave them in the comments. I'm happy to try to figure them out. All right. So with that, as I said, good luck in all your endeavors, especially if you're in the UK. Good luck to you. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I'll say farewell.